Deuteronomy 23, verses 1 and 2. A man with crushed or severed genitals may not enter the assembly of the Lord. A person of illegitimate birth may not enter the assembly of the Lord to the 10th generation. No one related to him may do so. Wow. So I got some questions. First off, why does God always seem to care so much about our genitals? That's just strange to me. It doesn't make any sense. And why does he hate babies of unwed parents so much? He hates them so much, he will condemn their offspring for 10 generations? Look, if anybody out there can explain to me how it is just to be condemned for the actions of someone else, well, call us, because the show is starting right now. That's right, folks. Today is July 9th, 2023, and I am your host, Secular Rarity, and joining me today is the always wonderful Mr. Sciencey Pants himself, Forrest Valkai.
It's me!
Hey, how are you, man?
I'm doing really well, dude. How are you?
I'm good. I always have a fun time here, and I feel like, when we start a show off talking about crushed and severed genitals, this is gonna be it's gonna be good, folks. So you are here at the right place. That's right. The Atheist Experience is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government, folks. And as always, we've got open lines. We love to talk to our theist friends out there. So definitely give us a call at 512-991-9242, or you can actually connect with the show on your computer at tiny.cc/callaxp. So we've got some calls coming in, and some of these are looking good, y'all. But before we get to that, one of my favorite things we've started doing is the question of the week. I love this. We always have fun stuff to talk about. And so we are going to give you the results of last week's Share Your Experience with Us. So last week, we asked all of you wonderful viewers to complete the question, what was God thinking when she created blank? And here are our top 3 answers. So number 3, we've got Rooks saying, what was God thinking when she created periods? Yeah, I know many of people that would say that is probably evidence for the lack of an all good God, right? Up next, we've got QC. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that right. What was God thinking when she created that part of your back that always itches that you can't ever scratch? Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Worst.
Yeah, seriously. That, or like the roof of your mouth, like when the roof of your mouth itches. That's so weird. Why does that happen? Okay. Number 1, we've got from Claire Wardropper. Also, by the way, folks, if I mispronounce your name, please just feel free to yell at me in the comments. I'm so sorry. But Claire says, what was God thinking when she created Andrew Tate? Yeah. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. That definitely is a number 1 answer right there, Claire. Yeah.
It was a really bad day. It was
Man,
a really bad day.
It's just like I was just really thinking of a way to punish humanity. So
they just she had all the dregs left over from everybody else, just all the slush, the scum. Like, well, fuck, what am I gonna do with this? You know what I mean? Put it somewhere.
Right. I've done all these other terrible things. Might as well add one more, I guess. But thank you so much for those wonderful answers, folks. And we have a new question for this week, and I am going to throw this to you, Forrest, first. Our question is, we want you to answer the prompt, which is, name a mistake God made during creation.
I mean, we already covered Andrew Tate, but I feel like we can expand that a little bit more to just humans in general.
Right.
What are we?
Right.
Everything was fine before we came along, and then we just blew it continuously on everything. Yeah, definitely us. If there was a mistake, it was us.
Just across the board. It's just like people in general, right? Yeah. Like, our good buddy here, Dr. Ben, is always talking about all the massive, terrible facts about your body, like how your bones suck and your eyes suck and everything but like you're saying, just people as a whole.
In general. Have you ever met one? They're not great.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. I do more often try to avoid people than I do most other things like butterflies or trees or yeah.
It was like God got bored and the creativity wasn't flowing. She made humans. It was a bad mistake. Then God tried meth and Andrew Tate happened. You know what I mean? Whole problem. Whole series of problems.
I love it. I want to say we're 5 minutes into the show, folks, and I think we have already hit some of the greatest topics that you're going to hear online. You know, but I think that is a great answer, Forrest. I love it. And folks, don't forget, if you've got answers, because we know you do, throw them in the comment section below. So give us what your thoughts are. Again, name a mistake God made during creation. So that is going to be fun, I'm sure. And I am always interested to hear what our lovely viewers have to say. And we have some other calls coming in, and I am excited. But before we get to those, Forrest, you and I were talking about something that you received not super long ago.
I actually forgot I was doing this.
What is this? It was a long email or something.
I got a book of an email, and we won't read the whole thing because it is lengthy. But like I sent this over to the ACA crew, and I was like, y'all, we have to talk about this. So this is an email from Mark. I won't say his last name. But I think this was right after the show with Seth Andrews. I'm pretty sure we talked about Mercury and whatnot, which I'll cover why. But this is an email that I got. It's titled "Atheist Believer in the Bible." Now, I'm not sure what this person is talking about, them or me. But they start the email by saying, "You are hilarious, absolutely hilarious. Thank you very much. In the last 2 or 3 episodes of the Atheist Experience, you have appeared on. You have revealed your belief in the Bible a number of times." So this is his thesis statement, that I believe in the Bible and he's going to prove it to me.
Strong start.
He then immediately follows that sentence with this sentence: "I won't quote you precisely because I don't really give a crap what you said." Why are we here? What are we doing? Number one, you said in one broadcast that humans should be able to live to 200 years old and still be able to run a marathon or something to that effect. I was talking about like the idea of like investing into biomedical technology and in medicine and like helping people live longer. Yes. This idea of extending human life for hundreds or even thousands of years is nothing more than wishful thinking. And as a biologist who teaches evolution, you should know that extending human life beyond what it's supposed to be goes against evolution and everything you teach. How? What are you talking about? Do you really think that as someone who studies evolution, I want as many humans to die as quickly as possible to speed evolution up? What is that? The idea of evolution is to pass on good mutations to the next generation and then to die off, right? So what if you live forever, then what does that mean? And he goes on for like a paragraph and a half about this. Before ending with, the fact that you want your life to be longer than evolution dictates just goes to show that you believe in the Bible too. How? What is that connection, bro? What is that? That's so weird. No, like, yes, evolution is real. No, I don't want to speed it up by having a crap load of kids and dying. What is the point of look up what a K-selected species is and get back to me. Then we've got number 2. You state that thousands of children die every day from starvation. Yes, that is a thing that I have a bone of contention with. They then go on to say, we should give food, children, and shelter, and clothing, and whatever else they need to prosper. Who gives a crap about the cost? To hell with money. We should just be doing it. I agree that if your society is failing to provide these basic needs, I think your society is a failure. But your belief in the Bible prevents you from doing that because you believe humans need incentive to prosper in the world. When have I ever said anything like that ever? That is the antithesis of all of my political beliefs. What are you talking about? This one also goes on for a long time, but then we get into the real meat of the issue. This is the longest paragraph. Again, I'm not going to read all this, but like, I do this bit where I talk about how we should destroy Mercury by mining it for resources and then use those resources to build solar panels around the sun to give us new energy here on the planet Earth, better than fossil fuels or any renewables that we have here. It's called the Dyson Swarm. It's a fun little thought experiment, and I turned it into this long bit where I talk about like turning the humanity into super civilization. So I did that bit on AXP. You said to elect you and they'll send humans to Mercury to mine it to build solar panels for Earth. I get guess what the problem is with this. I dare you. And if you get it wrong, you have to subscribe to this channel and my channel and Elliot's channel. You have to subscribe to all of us if you get it wrong. Go ahead and take a second. What's the weirdest freaking problem that you could have with this? Here's your chance. Who made you, God, to decide what happens to an ugly, inhospitable planet? Who made you, God, to decide to send humans to Mercury as your slaves for your egotistical, non-narcissistic wants? In all likelihood, sending humans to Mercury to do your bidding is a one-way trip to be slave laborers. Are you just going to sit on Earth and reap the benefits? How do you plan to pay these people? How will they spend their money? Where are they going to go to take days off from mining Mercury? Sure, they may have some times to stupidly figure out faster ways to travel between the planets, but maybe those humans will one day return to the planet, provoked by the treacherous work that you enslaved them to do. Where will they retire? This dude asks a million questions about the socioeconomics of how this illegal slave mining operation will be. You are ridiculous, along with all you other atheists who believe you have some sort of moral authority over us. And then he has this final statement here that just he says, he types out the letters POS. So I'm not shortening this to avoid saying the word shit here. He uses the word POS so many times. I am a POS human being. I am a POS human being who believes in the Bible, every word from Genesis and to Revelations. However, I don't read the Bible like you do, because you read the Bible exactly the same way as the POS theists do. You're a theist if you want. And because of that, you are a POS and you believe in the Bible at the same time. Stop being such a POS human being. And then he ends it off with, give children opportunities to survive and procreate because you believe in evolution and they should die off naturally as evolution dictates we must, because it says in the Bible that on the seventh day he rested. And thus ends the long email that I got. Thanks, Mark, for a weird email. Thank you for giving us some laughs. Genuinely strange.
Yeah.
I just wow.
I'm impressed by the amount of both passion and utter confusion in that. It's very interesting. It's amazing that you could fit all of that emotion into one email. But
every joke is reality. Evolution means something it doesn't mean. And my politics are backwards from whatever they actually are. I don't talk politics on the show, so I guess he's never heard me go on my ramblings. But like, wow, just an insane long. I cut so much of that out.
Sounds like it.
So let me know in the comments if you want like a full breakdown of this email on another video somewhere. Yeah. It'll be a fun time. And we can have like a whole reacting to haters for fun and profit. Like do a whole bunch of these emails. I get so many.
And remember, folks, if you really want to passionately express thoughts to Forrest, well, this is a great place to do it. We've got open lines. You don't have to take the time to go through typing all that stuff. You can just call us and say it all right here, because we'd love to have that. I would honestly be interested in speaking with that person.
I would love if that was an actual call. That would have been a great call to take.
Yeah. But speaking of calls, how about we grab one?
Let it begin.
Let's go talk with Tim, him from China. Sounds like you want to talk about some reincarnation. So, hey, Tim, you're on with Secular Rarity and Forrest.
Hello.
Oh, hey, sorry, my phone broke up. Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you?
You're really well.
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. Yeah, first of all, I wanted to thank you guys very much for running the show. My own background is I was raised in the American Bible Belt as like a Baptist, and you guys helped push me in the direction of atheism, so definitely thank you guys for that.
Awesome. Real quick, Tim, are you, real quick, Tim, hang on. Tim. Are you on speakerphone by any chance? Because we're getting some kind of echo. Can you take us off speakerphone and put your face to the mic?
I am, okay. Yeah, 1 second. Will do. Okay. Yeah, let me
just hard to hear you. We want to make sure everybody gets good audio from you.
All right.
Oh, that is so much better.
Sure. Is that any better?
Immediately better.
Yeah, go ahead.
Nothing.
Great.
Oh,
there you go. Yeah. So, as I was saying, I practice Jainism. Are you familiar with that at all, or?
A little bit.
What was it again? Say the name again.
Hello? Okay. Jainism, the Jain religion.
Oh, yeah.
I would say the world's only religion, in that it rejects the idea of creationism, and it just, the universe is internally a recurrent system, essentially, that we find ourselves in. So I guess it's kind of a gift to you guys. First of all, I'll give you guys the Jain argument against creationism, against God, which is simply that, like, in order to create a world, a being would have to, on some level, be physical. And if it's physical, it's subject to change, or what we may call entropy in terms of modern physics. So therefore, it couldn't be eternal. So there couldn't be a being that simultaneously created the world and is eternal. So it rejects the idea of like a created, external, Abrahamic sort of, Abrahamism wasn't really what they're responding to, but it seems to undercut that kind of idea of a God.
I think there's a little bit of an issue with that, but I don't think it's terribly important. But I do think there's a bit of an issue of saying that simply because something is physical,
and maybe
it can't be eternal, right? Because we don't necessarily know that that's the case. Like, yes, entropy obviously is a big deal, but like the universe itself could be eternal in some sense, and it's just that it's kind of changing, how the energy presents itself. So, but anyway, I don't think it matters.
I like the argument. I like where it's coming from.
Yeah.
I know, having done this and other shows like this, I know for sure the answer will be, but magic. You know what I mean?
that is a good point. That is a good point. But yeah, either way, keep going, Tim. Yeah.
So the main point I wanted to make was maybe a probabilistic argument for some form of reincarnation or some form of like eternal return, that sort of idea.
Sure.
So where this comes from is, like, we have the conscious mind, right? And we have the physical worlds. So for example, you would say like the idea of a chair, right? The word chair, right? That is an idea. That's a concept. That's not the same as the physical chair itself, right?
Yeah.
Are you talking like just
so,
like
in Sanskrit,
mental concepts, or are you talking about like Plato's idea of like the world of forms?
Yeah, I would disagree on the second thing Forrest just said, but I would
agree
agree on the
I
first
understand
thing.
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Sure. So I would say like what they would say like called jiva in Sanskrit would be essentially like all your senses, all your thoughts, all your memories, kind of everything the mind does. And then the external world, right, would be like ajiva, like just meaning, just like theist, atheist, it's another Indo-European religion, so, kind of the same morphology going on there. But the two are necessarily interlinked, is the Jain idea. So, like, the classic paradox, they would say, is like, from one point of view, the entire universe is in modern physics, you would say, inside of your brain, in that, like, any experience, any memory you have, like, even if you're looking at a star millions of light years away, that's still some neuronal activity in your brain of the observation itself. So any phenomena happening in the world is really actually just neurons in your brain. But at the same time, your brain is an object in the universe. So the two are simultaneously true. So you can't really separate the phenomenological from the physical. They're just they form a dynamic system, is the idea. So there's always consciousness and there's always the physical.
Let me kind of poke a little bit here at something, Tim, because I'm worried that where you're going is a little bit more into that thing that Forrest had mentioned briefly about like the Plato, the ideal forms and stuff, and I want to make sure that we're all understanding each other and stuff. So
I'm not a Platonist then.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. But it seems to me that what's really going on, right? More often. So like when you say the whole universe can essentially be encapsulated in your brain, right? In some senses, I don't think that's a sense that's in anything meaningful. I think that's it's a very flowery, pretty way to try to explain the fact that at the end of the day, what seems to be driving us as people is this squishy substance in our head. But what's really important about that squishy substance and the thoughts and concepts and all the firings of the neurons and whatnots is the relation to the things outside of us, right? So the important aspect is not that all of the senses are going on in the brain and all of the phenomenon is occurring in the brain. It's the fact that the phenomenon that's occurring in the brain has a direct correlation to the other things outside of us. Does that make sense?
Oh, I would agree.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool. Then we're on the same page.
And
there.
actually,
Cool.
like Giants would say, like there couldn't be, and there couldn't be such a thing as like a ghost in like the very classical sense of just a mind but no body, because it would have no means of interacting with the world and no means of perceiving anything. So it would have no experience of anything.
I think we're both
so like
on board
the mind,
with that,
so to speak, whatever we want to use in kind of in person. Cool. So would you say like the brain generates consciousness or the brain channels consciousness, in your opinion?
Generates.
I would say generates, because channel seems to me to imply that it would be consciousness in that sense would have to be like radio waves. Like it's out there playing and we pick up on it. But that doesn't, there doesn't seem to be any indication that I've ever seen, at least, that would indicate that. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. So I can still make an argument from that. So like essentially consciousness is sort of an emergent phenomenon of, all the particles in your brain being in a certain position according to the laws of physics. Am I correct?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah. It's
way
a basic
to break down that sentence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't think that's, I don't think
cool.
that's a terrible understanding. So.
All right. So then, are you familiar with the idea like the Poincare recurrence theorem?
Say again.
So
you broke up a little bit.
Oh, the Poincare. I may be pronouncing it wrong, but it's like Poin. Okay, sorry. In mathematics, there's something called the Poincare recurrence theorem. I may be saying it wrong, but it's like Poincarre. So
I'm not familiar with
it. If you have a dice, right, and you roll the dice. Okay. Yeah. So like if you have a dice, like a nerd, I play D&D, right? So roll a D10, right? And you roll it again, and you roll it again. Once you've rolled it 10 times, mathematically, it's going to have to repeat at least once, right? Because there's only 10 possible ways this dice could roll. Or, the six-sided dice, roll it 6 times. Eventually, it's going to have to repeat.
Sure.
So if you look at the universe, the observable universe is a certain volume. It's a really huge volume, but it is a finite volume. And they're particles, and therefore a finite number of arrangements of the particles. So if you wait a very, 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 very long time, we could ever conceptualize, but you could calculate what this is, and it's something like 10 to the 10 to the 10 to the E or something like that, I've heard. And at that point, it doesn't matter if we're saying like seconds or years. Yeah.
Real quick, I just want to make sure we're all following, because I thought this might be where you were going when you brought up that mathematical concept a second ago, and I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. It kind of sounds like what you're saying is, because let's just hypothetical sake here, let's just say that all of this is true, which is there's only so many ways that we can arrange that atoms can be arranged, right? And if we just wait long enough time, eventually there seemingly would be this recombination of atoms in such a way so as to give my brain the same structure that it has right now. Is that kind of where you're going?
Sure. Yeah, like if you wait long enough, every possible thing will repeat infinitely times every possible way.
Okay.
I have a million problems with that.
Yeah. Please, Forrest, go ahead and.
Okay. So, just to start with, because I get where you're coming from here, is that I looked up this theorem that you're talking about to make sure I was on the same page as you, and it's the idea. It's sort of like the normal distribution in elementary statistics, where it's like, if I repeat this system enough times, eventually it will distribute normally. With this one, if I repeat this thing enough times, I can pick any random arbitrary formation of it, and it will hit that random or arbitrary formation again and again and again. It just takes a long time to do it. And you're right. That makes sense mathematically and statistically. That vibes. The problem is, when we talk about consciousness as an emergence property of brains, you keep using the word particles, and I'm going to come back to it. But like the brain is made of neurons. There are about 86 billion neurons in the human brain, if I remember right. So we have, if we're talking about what's coming out of my brain right now, it is because of the exact configuration of those 86 billion neurons. Let's say every single human that has ever been born or will ever be born has the exact same number of neurons, which isn't true, but whatever. Let's say we have the exact same number of neurons in every single brain. How many different permutations can you get out of 86 billion objects in whatever configuration they would be? A freaking lot. I look at I looked up to make sure I had the formula right. The way to calculate permutations has a couple of factorials in there. So like you've got a lot going on here with 86 billion factorial as your numerator, and then 86 billion minus the number of objects selected, which would be all of them. But like you've got like, so how many generations would you have to have for this theorem to take into effect? How many different human lifespans we have to cover for 86 billion things to hit that exact same one permutation again of being in this exact configuration? It's a really long time. So if that was your argument for reincarnation, that eventually with enough humans, if we all have the exact same number of neurons, you will get a human with my exact neuronal configuration again. Sure, it would take trillions and quadrillions of lifetimes, but like maybe you'd get one. But then there's the additional problem of the fact that like my personality, who I am, the person sitting here speaking to you today is not just this configuration of neurons. It's also my experiences that play into how these neurons are firing and going off. So like they would have to have lived my exact life as well and have all my same experience and thoughts and behaviors and habits and things that are now being, played out through these neurons that are there being played on this like a piano. So like the sheet music of my life being played on the instrument of my exact neuronal configuration, showing you now this weird Caucasian mess. That's another factor that you have to put in here. It's not just the permutations of the neurons, it's the permutations of the lifetimes and the life histories and experiences, my parents and my family and my friends and my wife and every good and bad thing that ever happened to me, all building up to this moment. Like those also have to have repeated perfectly to get to where we are right now. And then you get into like a whole problem of free will, which is not where this call is supposed to go. But I'm just saying, like, I get where you're coming from. And on paper, it sounds great. But in practice, it doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah. So, Tim, in the words of the great Johnny P, what is thy response?
Yeah. So I would say you are correct. Certainly, like if we're talking about, the chance of all the events happening that get to this present moment, yeah, it's going to be a crazy small number or however you're going to put that. But the thing to keep in mind too is like, there isn't just one way to have a brain that generates consciousness, right? Other people certainly are conscious and they have different arrangements of neurons, right? And we're not necessarily talking about like Boltzmann brains where just, particles are randomly forming a brain in like deep space out of just pure quantum chance. We were part of an evolutionary system that, the brains of our ancestors were useful for their survival, and over time it kind of evolves a certain way. So if you're talking about and just think about in your own life, right? Like they say, like, I don't know if this is totally true or not, but they say like every 7 years, all the cells in your body change, even if that's like literally true, like certainly the particles, you're eating, you're breathing, you're shitting. Yeah, and the state you're in now is not the state you were in, 5 seconds ago. That's constantly changing, but you have a continuous consciousness. So consciousness isn't tied to one particular state of neurons, but it's more this dynamic system that allows consciousness either generated or.
I would agree with that, Tim, but I think one of the things that you might be overlooking in this instance is if what we're trying to do is essentially say there seemingly is a formation of matter currently that has some experience, some progression forward in time, doing actions, thinking thoughts, all this stuff, right? And that eventually, once we just watch the clock tick enough, we can get back to that same lump of matter that has all these things. But see, what's interesting for me and problematic is how you just said, like, well, we know that different formations of neurons can give us consciousness. Like, well, yeah, totally. But I would definitely say that changing the structure of your brain would have dramatic effects on your personality. I mean, we've seen this. And if what we're talking about at the end of the day is this idea of reincarnation, of essentially living multiple lives, then if we, let's just say 86 bajillion years down the road, and these neurons are starting to form again, that would make SR, but the brain forms in a different pattern, well, then that wouldn't be reincarnation, right? That wouldn't, because it's not the same construction from the beginning.
Sure. And I mean, I could get into kind of like the giant metaphysics, but if you don't have the experience of this, it's probably just going to sound strange. I mean, so like, unlike the Abrahamic religions, we don't really have the idea of faith. Like, it's something you shouldn't believe any, or because you read it in a book somewhere. It should be something you experience for yourself. And through like meditation and certain practices I've had kind of a state of ego death where I had consciousness, but it's not really tied to my identity, if that makes sense. And so the idea, I mean, this might sound very strange if you don't have this kind of a mindset, but that like consciousness kind of finds the physical system, the brain, or I would even think like an AI could be conscious, if it's sufficiently well developed, and it kind of connects to that. There's kind of a connection between the two. But if you have kind of more of the model where you could see how, it would seem unlikely to get exactly the same one, certainly.
Yeah. Well, I think there probably is some more meat on this bone. But what I'm going to suggest, Tim, is that you give us a call back next week or the week after, because I know we've got a few more calls in the queue. I've got some great super chats I got to read too. But I do really think this is an interesting discussion. Oh yeah. But I think one of the big sticking points for me is it seems like we're taking a concept that has never really been fully described and clarified, right? And we're kind of trying to shave off some of the things that are just obviously ridiculous, but we're still trying to keep this concept, even though we don't have a good understanding of what it is. And what happens when we do stuff like that, I find more often than not, is we take away the entire value and purpose of what this thing is supposed to be, right? The crux of what reincarnation is you getting to live another life with a connection to that previous life in some way, right? And it just seems to me almost like you shaved off so much of the stuff that is clearly ridiculous that now the core aspect of what this concept is really isn't even coming through anymore. And that I always struggle with that when we take broad concepts and we kind of water them down to such a degree that they're just not what they're supposed to be anymore, But either way, Tim, I really did enjoy the crap out of this. And I think Forrest did too. So please give us a call back in the future. And if you've got any thoughts, we've got that awesome fan run Facebook page, fan run Discord. So go hit us up there and have some chats. So what do you think about the Boltzmann brain stuff, Forrest? That's always such an interesting thought to me. And I don't know how people get to that conclusion.
I think people, as someone who values his brain very much, I feel like people put way too much stock in like this brain is like this magical wonderland thing. It's just a collection of cells, and it does some really dope things. But like, you got to leave it there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They just want to go a little far sometime on it.
A little bit.
I think so. But we have some other great calls. But first, I am going to read these awesome super chats because some of them are directed at you, Forrest. So you're gonna have to answer. So, folks, if you want to make Forrest and I say and or answer silly things, right? If you want us to do this, this is the way. So $4.99 from Alex Mackick. First time listening in live. Love you guys and all you do. So thank you so much. We've got $5 from Julia Scholl. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. I'm so sorry, Julia. And that one says, how did the chimpanzees take the news when they found out that we are their closest living relative? I think it caused flattered. I think it caused a stir for sure. I'm sure they were talking about it at all the chimp meetings. And then another $5 from Julia. We've got Forrest. You don't believe in the supernatural. Yeah. So when you're playing D&D, do you believe in lucky and cursed dice?
No. You can have poorly functioning dice if they're not balanced properly, right. But like, no, it is easy though. As a human, I like to find a little thing that I like very much, and this is my special one. It doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah, I do that.
You have to know that.
I do that too, and it's like I do it all the time with stuff, and it's the dumbest stuff. It's like I think this cup is better, and it's like it's not. There's no difference. We've got $1.99 from Thomas Gallipoli. That one says message retracted. So whatever Thomas was going to tell us, they did not want to tell us there. But in another $1.99 super chat from Thomas,
there it is.
We have the question, Forrest, what do you think of Robert G. Ingersoll?
Nothing, because I don't know who that is. So I will look that person up and I'll let you know what I think about them later.
Good. And because the question was not directed at me, I will not answer it. Julia coming back in with $5. We got just a couple more, and then we're going to grab some calls. But Julia's coming back and saying, can the earth be flat and hollow at the same time? That's
interesting. How would that?
I don't think it would work.
Like pita bread?
Yeah,
you a little gap in there.
Just pop it open. Oh my god! I think the hollow Earth conspiracy thing is more interesting than the flat Earth one. I just think there's rainbows and dinosaurs and stuff in the middle of the Earth. I love that.
The delicious Earth pupusa.
Delicious Earth pupusa. Oh my gosh! Okay,
I'm looking up this Ingersoll guy, and it says he was known as the great agnostic. An orator during the golden age of free thought who campaigned in defense of agnosticism. Mm-hmm. From that sentence, sounds like a cool, interesting guy, but I know I'm going to scroll down the Wikipedia and also he had slaves and
that's a pretty common thing, I think. Once you go back just 100 years in our history, it's like, right. Oh, okay, that's terrible.
Gosh.
So we've got one from another one from Julia. We've got $5. What is the maximum amount of skulls you can have on a shelf without being creepy? And then we've got the Atheist Christian for $5 who asks, why do we drive on a parkway and park in a driveway? That is a good question.
That's proof there's no God right there.
That is honestly. Well, okay. We got a couple of cool calls coming in. I think we're going to keep it rolling, maybe talk about some consciousness. But first, I have to tell you guys something really, really cool, okay?
What he's doing right now is why I'm so happy I'm not hosting. I always forget to do this part.
I don't know if people know about this, okay? So it is a big deal. It has been kept secret, but we are opening the lid. We are letting this known to everyone that Saturday, August 26th of 2023, the ACA will be having the annual Bat Cruise once again. Woo!
Hey!
I'm gonna be there. You can come hang out and meet people like Forrest, Valkai, J. Mike, other hosts of the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, the Nonprofits, all the wonderful crew. Come hang out with the ACA. You get to spend a lot of time chatting it up with like-minded free thinkers. All of these wonderful people will be on board, and you get to hang out for the 2-hour cruise around Lady Bird Lake. And when it's done, the cruise will pause at the Congress Avenue Bridge at sundown for the emergence of the world's largest urban bat colony. So get your tickets now. It is very simple. You just go to tiny.cc/batcruise, and that will be really awesome.
It's exciting. I love the question somebody sent in about how many skulls can you have without being creepy. Yeah. I'm trying to find out.
You're trying to figure
just above this. I've got a bunch of them lined up above this shelf here.
You and Erica Guts It Gibbon. Like, y'all are taking the cake on that one. I love it. I love it. And
you
we just
let me know when I become creepy, and I'll buy 10 more.
Yeah. We just got one more super chat from John McCarthy for $10 with no message attached. Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody out there that is supporting us. What you want to talk some more about consciousness? You feeling it?
I feel like I'm looking at what the call screen says, and I feel like we've kind of covered it, but maybe this guy has something else to say about it. So I'm down to touch on it. Yeah,
we might be able to hit this one pretty quick. We're gonna go out to India. Hard, him is asking us some thoughts on consciousness and divinity. And hey, how you doing? You're chatting it up with Forrest and SR.
Hi, Forrest and SR. My name's Hard, and I had this question about consciousness from like the standpoint of biology, basically, in the sense of like, how do you conceptualize consciousness? In the sense of like, what is consciousness? If you define it as like the state of being aware, okay, what is and isn't aware? Like, how do we decide that? Then if we decide that, then we like, what makes something conscious? And then I think like that's like, I suppose the strongest argument you could make for divine, for clarification, I'm agnostic, but like, I guess this is, from my perspective, the strongest argument you could make for a god or a godlike being. But like, I wanted to know what you think. Is consciousness just like the product of maybe like chemical reactions between your neurons? And if it is, what makes like the emergent property of consciousness different from the emergent property of any other chemical reaction, like metabolism or respiration? Like, what do you think, Forrest or SR?
Forrest is definitely going to get the bulk of this. This is his wheelhouse, so I'll tack on one or two cute sentences near the end. But go ahead, please.
I actually want Forrest a lot. He's
So you hit the nail on the head by calling it, an emergent property, because you think about like the tide. What is how do you get a scoop of the tide? Can you go have like a bottle of Tide or something like that? Like the tide is the emergent property of all these water molecules all together, and the moon, and all. It's just something that's happening as a result of all these things put together. And it's the same thing with consciousness. You can have one single neuron firing and not call it consciousness. But if you have sufficient amount of them all doing something, then you come up with this state, which generally is defined as just like, awareness and response to deliberate response to your surroundings. The response to your surrounding in any way, shape, or form is part of the qualifications of what we call something alive. And so adding on to that, this like awareness of what it means to respond and what your surroundings actually are, that's where you get into the realm of consciousness. And that is 100% just governed by the shape and structure and electrical activity in your brain. And we can demonstrate that. There's this famous story of Phineas Gage, which if you've ever even heard the word neuroscience, you've probably heard the story of Phineas Gage. Is a super common, a famous case study of this guy that had his frontal lobe obliterated in a mining or in a railroad accident. So a bunch of dynamite went off. It blasted a metal rod through his head, and it was super heated, so it cauterized everything on the way out. And so this guy just had an instant frontal lobotomy and was able to literally walk away from it, and completely changed as a person. Before this happened, he was kind and respectful, hardworking, sober, responsible. After this happened, he was sexually aggressive, rude, mean, predatory, cruel, lazy. Just all of his basal animal instincts came out basically when he lost the personality, thinky parts of his brain. And this was kind of the beginning of neuroscience, where we're like, oh, turns out different parts of the brain seem to control different things. And this is a gross oversimplification of this stuff. But like,
it's like, how we used to think like, stuff in your health is controlled by these things called humors. Like you just like, and so like if you want to get healthy, just, let some stuff out. But then we realize, oh, there's organs in here that do stuff.
Exactly. We used to think that we used to think if you had an illness, you probably had too much blood. Or not, or something, it was just, we had this imbalance of humors. And so, this was one of those things that kind of led us down the path of realizing there's a lot more going on here. And so, and again, that's just the famous example. There's a million and one more where you have somebody who's one kind of person, gets kicked in the head, and then they're a different kind of person. You have brain damage that does this. There's a reason why a massive percentage of death row inmates who are there for violent crimes have a history of frontal lobe damage or brain damage in general. There's a reason why people like football players have a tendency to become violent and having domestic abuse problems because they have history of head injuries. And so like you when we look at what consciousness is, we can be sure that it's just a thing that happens in brains. That doesn't mean that we have it all figured out. I can explain to you when a neuron fires, there's this sequence called an action potential, which is where you have sodium influx, and then you have this spike of charge, and then you have potassium efflux where it goes down and hyperpolarizes, and then has to balance out and repolarize. And you have that little beep boop kind of like configuration. Like we can talk about all these chemical steps that lead up to the firing of a neuron. We can talk about what happens at an axon terminal when you dump neurotransmitters into a synapse and what kind of effect that's going to have. We're able to make drugs and do treatments and things because of this understanding. But if you ask us what is the initial cause of this sodium moving, that what's the thing that causes the thing that causes the thing that causes the beginning of the thought, we're kind of left out in the cold. We don't, there's a little bit of gap in our knowledge there. But as usual, that gap in knowledge is not enough reason to say, okay, well, then there must be something supernatural. It just means we haven't learned this.
That's an ignorance fallacy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you had asked us, 60 years ago how any of this works, we wouldn't have had step 2, 3, 7, 9, anything. And now we have like all but step 2. And so, there's a lot of people out there, well, then it must be God. It's like, no, that's not how it works. Right. So yeah, that's the long and short of it, bro. It is just the function of your brain. And if your brain were different, your mind would be different. And no amount of permutations will recreate exactly who you are right now.
Yeah, like the thing is, even after all of this, I'm having a difficult time like getting an actual definition of consciousness, because here's the thing. What does it mean to be aware? What does it mean what are the practical implications of being aware? Like, what does that mean?
Welcome to philosophy and neuroscience in grad school. We don't know.
Yeah.
Like
unfortunately, we've been talking about that for a while, Hard. And we've narrowed it. We've gotten the focus to such a place where there's a lot of stuff that we used to think about that doesn't exist anymore. But again, I mean, exactly what Forrest was saying, there is still a lot of information that we don't know, and more understanding of that will benefit us. So like I know, and please, Forrest, tell me if I'm wrong on this or if you've heard anything about this or whatever, but there's more study going on to like how the spinal cord is relating to consciousness. Am I
I don't know.
Okay,
that's not my
That's
area.
a Shannon Q thing.
Yeah, I'm not up to date on the literature, but I can say that we have found some really freaking cool stuff in like peripheral, like in your peripheral nervous system that's like weirdly related. And we've also found stuff about your microbiome that's shockingly influential over your brain. Yeah,
like the stuff in your gut.
Yeah, the microfauna living in your guts actually have a significant impact on your personality, and your metabolism and everything else. So like, yeah, the brain's like it, as we talked about in the end of the last call, everybody, I love brains very much, but people like to pretend like they're magic, and they're not. Yeah. They're just another organ. And just like the rest of your body, if you ever study anatomy and physiology, you learn how everything is connected in a really, really intimate way. And so if you're talking about the nervous system, there's a big part of it that you need to relate to the digestive system, or to the endocrine system, or to the skeletal system comes into it sometimes, or the integumentary system. They're all connected in a beautiful way.
I gotta like, have you ever watched Full Metal Alchemist? I think like one quote from that really sums it up. It says, all is one is all. It's basically like, everything is like different, but it's still connected in one way. And like without all of it, it like wouldn't work. So like, I suppose that sums it up pretty well, right?
I've never watched the show, but I get the vibe of it from what I've seen, and I get that quote. So yeah, I would agree. It is all connected. in chemical ways, in biological ways, in really, really, really cool ways. And you can expand that out and come up with a really neat quasi-spiritual experience, talking about biogeochemical cycles, how it's also connected to literally everything else on the planet. It's dope, dude. And there's a lot to think about there. You were asking great questions. And I think if you were to take those questions into somebody who's, has an expertise in this field, I've studied neuroscience at the collegiate level, but it's not my area of expertise. It's not where I specialize. So like, if you were talking to somebody who's a specialist in this, they'd probably have more interesting things to say. But as far as I know, you're still at that limit of understanding where it's like, yeah, but like, actually, what is it? I don't know. We're kind of lost on that. We're figuring it out.
Yeah. And if I can, I'm a big fan of trying to give our callers some homework hard. You can also just tell me to go screw myself. But two people that come to mind in this discussion, two people that always come to my mind, and not saying that everything they write is perfect or anything, but just saying maybe it's a next step for you. Look up some stuff by Patricia Churchland and Donald Hoffman. Both of them I know do talk about this, and they have interesting thoughts, and maybe that'll just lead you down a nice little trail to get even more information on it. And heck, maybe you come back and give us a call in a few weeks and explain it to us. Like, we always love that. So
I always love recommending Robert Sapolsky as well. Robert Sapolsky is my freaking hero, dude.
Yeah, we'll be back. Thank you for that. Also, just one more thing. Like, this is going off of how stuff is connected. A bit of an unrelated topic, though, but this is something Forrest talks a lot about, and this is basically trans people. And like, I actually had a theory explanation for this about trans people in the context of human behavioral ecology. Would you like to hear that?
We've got a couple of other calls, Hard, but I do think that's something that would probably be an interesting discussion in the future. So just give us a call back next time you see Forrest or myself on, because I always love to take time to talk about why properly applied skepticism leads you to being an ally of the LGBTQ. I fully believe that. I stand on that. I love that. And so, let's have that conversation next week or in the future. But we're going to let you go for now, Hard, but thank you so much. And again, look up those people that Forrest and I were talking about, and hopefully it becomes a fun experience, and you can just nerd out and find out all the cool stuff about the brain. So
yeah, dude,
that is always a fun time. I gotta say, whenever you get some topic in your head and it just won't let go of you until you feel like you've really started to understand it. So one of these days I'll go through that. The first time that I had that was going through is white chocolate actually chocolate? I went through about 2 weeks of my life where every free moment I had was trying to research how to make chocolate. So maybe one of these days I'll go through it. It's an interesting time, but we've got other calls. We've got super chats. I've got cool stuff to tell you. Like, for instance, if you're enjoying the show and you like what we do here, there's a lot of very easy ways that you can support this awesome channel here. You can become a member for as little as 99 cents a month. You can click the join button below this video, and that will give you access to special chat emojis. So go ahead and just throw everybody's face into the chat. If you are a member, utilize those perks as much as you want. I'm very sorry, mods. I really do apologize. You can also send a super chat with a question or comment, which we will read live on air during the show, and I've got a couple of those to do right now. And then don't forget, folks, one of the most simplest, easiest things you can do that makes a huge difference is just liking the damn video. It takes you no time at all. Like, subscribe if you haven't, comment below, share it out to some friends. I know all of you know how to do this. Like, I know you do. So we've got 1799 AED. I'm not sure what currency that is. AED? Is that don't know.
Okay. Our Armenian and European dick waffles. I don't know.
I like it. Well, Alula 3 EEB, thank you so much for that. And we've got another one from our friend Thomas Gallipoli, 499, saying Ingersoll fought in the U.S. Civil War to free the slaves and was a promoter of women's equality and was pro-gay and was a pioneer of a lot of atheism today.
I'm a fan of everything you just said. So this guy sounds pretty tight.
Yeah, he sounded even better. Yeah. We've got $5 Canadian from the Merlin. Should we as a species take over our evolution evolution, or do you think God screwed us up too badly for us to succeed in the attempt? I think we're already kind of, we're already kind of doing it. Like, we fix broken bones, we take people's rotten teeth out. Like, yeah, we're already kind of hacking this stuff. Then we've got 999 from Lamatsu, which says, Forrest, is the distinction between macro and micro evolution valid? Do evolutionary biologists actually make such a distinction?
Yeah, it's a real distinction. So like microevolution is genotypic changes within a population. There's small little changes where you see what is technically evolution, because remember, the definition of evolution is just any change in heritable characteristics within a population over multiple generations. So like microgeneration is just that, little genotypic changes within a population that makes that population better fit for its environment. Macroevolution is big phenotypic changes that we see over the course of the fossil record. That we see, one animal evolving into a new species, involving a type of animal changing its overall body plan, niche partitioning on a grand scale. Like those are, big things that we see. And yes, there is a distinction between those things. And yes, they teach it in introductory bio classes. And yes, they teach it in evolutionary bio classes. And in all of my years of schooling, in all the degrees that I've achieved, in all my time in grad school, I have heard those distinctions actually legitimately made 3 times. I've heard 3 people bring them up and talk about them in one sentence. And it was pretty much just to distinguish and say, so we're talking about this right now. And they were like, yeah. And then we moved on. So anybody who because it is evolution,
right?
And like the word species doesn't really actually mean anything on a biological level, and so like talking about kinds doesn't mean anything. So if you ever hear anyone trying to split hairs between micro and macro evolution in order to try to debunk evolution, guarantee those people are using the words wrong, and they're not knowing what they're talking. Anybody who says like, well, it's still a dog, like, no, sorry, that's not how it works.
If somebody is ever trying to use that you've never seen a pine tree into an elephant thing, you could just feel comfortable they probably don't have a great grasp.
They're probably using these words incorrectly. Yes.
So we've got $5 from Seraph, who's been a member for 6 months. Thank you so much. And they say, I couldn't really think of a message, but I'm not about to waste all the character space it gave me for this. So this is the message, I guess. Thanks. Well, thank you.
I like
we
that
appreciate
kind of thinking.
that. Yeah, I do too. And then we've got $9.99 from Goody Whittlestick. And no message there. So thank you for that as well. And thank you all for everybody that donates. We do appreciate it. And real quick, before we go talk about some spiritual experiences, I want to remind you folks, we have a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form. Very simple.
Go to subscribe to
it. And it's so awesome because tiny.cc/AEN podcast, y'all, you can just put this stuff on in the background, go about your day, listen to stuff. You don't have to see my face. You don't have to see Forrest's face. But if you want to, we wouldn't be upset with that. But you can listen to all of the latest shows from the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen Truth Wanted, the Nonprofits, and others on this one great channel. So we like to make it easy for you. We like to make it simple, and you're welcome. So, but we are going to go out to Texas. We're going to be talking with Jimmy. Him is telling us that we actually know a lot about spiritual experiences. So that's great. Jimmy, you're chatting up with Secular Rarity and Forrest Valkai. And I'm just going to start off by asking just what do you mean by spiritual experiences? I think that's always a great place for us to start.
Well, I know Forrest is very into the neuroscience, and I heard him say earlier with the previous caller that it was in his area of expertise, but then he also said that we don't know much about it, that it's a question mark. I thought that was kind of contradictory.
No, sorry, I want to be clear. I said we don't know enough about like very specific things that we are still learning within neuro. We know a ton about neuroscience. There's very specific things that we're still studying in there. And maybe because it isn't my area that I work in, maybe we've actually learned some stuff about those things I haven't heard. The last neuroscience class I seriously took was a couple of years ago. So like maybe we've learned some stuff since then.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, that we have learned plenty, that if you haven't looked into the matter, that, the neuroscience of religion has been going on for decades now. And if you haven't looked into it, I really suggest you do so.
I've read up on a little bit on that.
They don't really speak of them in terms of spiritual experience, the term that the neuroscientists prefer in Western academia, I suppose, is mystical experience, a term that was originally laid down by William James. And then if you go to the UK, you know, they'll use a different term. They'll speak about the loss of ego. You know, they won't use the term mystical experience so much, but they'll speak of it in terms of the dissolution of the default mode network. If you've heard that term before.
Can I jump in for a second, Jimmy? Because I wanna make sure we're all on the same page here. So when you're describing it, it sounds like a lot of what you've said thus far when talking about spiritual experiences is information that is based on, you know, scientific experiments where essentially it seems like the spiritual experiences are just, you know, our body doing the normal thing that it does. Is that what you're saying? Are you saying that spiritual experiences are just completely equal to the brain just firing with the neurons and synapses and so forth? Because I don't think that I don't think I would disagree with that concept. I think spiritual experiences are because of the wiring in our brain and the chemicals and stuff. So if that's what you think, then yeah, I think we're on the same page.
Well, I wouldn't even say it's necessarily what I think. I think it's a conclusion that they're coming to in neuroscience that, yeah, it is a biologically normal experience. It's been happening for millennia, and now they can induce it in volunteers. And, you know, this is something that's been going on for thousands of years.
Sure.
And, you know, different religions have approached it in various ways. And it's had different names throughout history. You know, the Hindus might have called it samadhi. The Christians may have called it the direct revelation of the Holy Spirit. But each of the world's major religions does have a term for this experience, yes.
Yeah, no, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, is like I am familiar with what you're talking about in terms of that specific research. Like, I've heard a bunch of this, and like, yeah. What we call spiritual experiences are just profound experiences that are very normal and very explainable. And people who are ignorant of what's going on in their minds or what the situation they're in or whatever like that, like all the people for thousands of years before the concept of neuroscience was a thing, those people attributed it to something supernatural, and they were erroneous in that attribution, but we can still make these things happen. So like there's a reason why there's a science, for lack of a better word, to worship services. They bring the lights to a certain level and they put the music to a certain level and they have everybody do the same kind of motion at the same time, and you feel connected with the people around you, and then you have this euphoric kind of overload of endorphins. It's the exact same thing that happens at a rock concert. That's why live music was so popular when it first became like these big crazy lights and fire and all these things, these rock shows. That's what they're there for, is to give you that euphoria and that community and that sense of belonging and all those things that we attribute to a spiritual experience. Mushrooms do the same thing sometimes. So like, yeah, I understand, and I'm familiar with what you're talking about, but why does that, you're calling it as a theist, I see here.
Yeah.
Does that tell us anything about the existence of a God? Because to me, that's ammo as an atheist to say, yeah, every magical religious experience that you or anybody else can point to, I can explain with science. And it's not magic. And it's just a thing that can happen. And it has an evolutionary basis. And it has a reason to fit into cultural anthropology. It's not special. Right. And so, like, where are you coming from with this call? Like, what are you trying to get at?
That was exactly where I wanted to go
right,
for. Well, you read my mind.
Okay. I have kind of an issue with the term supernatural. I once asked Matt Dillahunty to define supernatural, and he couldn't do it. He said, I've never had an example of the supernatural, so I have no way to define it. And I feel like a lot of atheists define it in such a way to mean something like magic or something that defies the laws of physics. And I don't think that's necessarily what people are talking about when they talk about spiritual or mystical experiences. And it's not necessarily what you get at a rock concert either, or if you take, you know, a recreational dose of mushrooms and go to a rock concert. You know, even if you look into the neuroscientific studies, they don't use recreational doses to induce these experiences. They use, you know, what Terence McKenna called a heroic dose and that's definitely something you don't want to take at a rock concert.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
this
the thing
talking about the complete.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you
Oh,
off, but I kind of feel like I understand where you're getting at here. So,
Yeah.
stop me if I make a mistake here. But like, I get what Matt's saying here. Knowing Matt, that sounds like some stuff that he would say, because he would want to break that concept down as much as he could and really have a well thought out explanation for it and a good definition of it. And that's hard to do with such a colloquial term. Because when we talk about supernatural experiences as atheists or as scientists or whatever like that, we are talking about it in this way: a phenomenon that happened where a person, it felt a very unique way. They had a unique experience, it's a phenomenological thing, maybe a little bit of a neurochemical thing that's brought on by extreme and unique stimuli that normally they wouldn't be exposed to. And so it feels very personal and very moving and very profound to them. Like, that's what we would describe. But that's not what our friends and neighbors, the common folks around us, mean when we talk about supernatural. What they mean is something outside of the natural realm, supernatural. They mean something that is magical, something that has no logical explanation, something that you can't apply science to, something that only comes from a spiritual, otherworldly realm and touches some magical, spiritual, holy part of their internal being that's separate from physical reality. They have this very woo-woo esoteric crystal magic, whatever, the Mercury was in this position and Jupiter sharded and then I saw a bird, and like that's what they're talking about. And so we can't come up with an explanation or a definition that fits that for everybody, because everybody has a different way of saying it. Everybody means something a little bit different. So like, that's why Matt or me as well wouldn't use such a word.
Right.
I don't. Yeah, but I think that description is entirely irrelevant to what neuroscience is currently trying to say about.
I agree, but that's what most theists are going to be talking about. It's like when people try to use quantum mechanics and stuff to talk about God, and they're like, oh well, there's this special connection to the universe and entanglements and all that stuff. Wow, magical, whatever. That's not what average people are talking about when they talk about God. They're talking about an actual invisible person in the sky who's watching you masturbate. And so like when we talk about supernatural experiences or spiritual experiences, you and I can talk about neuroscience. That's fine. And we're going to come to the exact same agreement, which is that it isn't magic. But everybody else who's using those words to justify their faith, they're not using them the same way. And they're not going to be talking about the same thing we're talking about. So that I return to my original question: where are you going with this?
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't think the average person has had such a phenomenon occur. And
hang on, Jimmy, give me a second here, because I really would like to. I'd like to make progress, and I feel like we can with this call. But I feel like currently for about 10 minutes, we've kind of just been circling a little bit, and I want to get to what is honestly really important to people like myself and Forrest and a lot of the people here watching today, which is there seems to be a connection for you with spiritual experiences and potentially this belief in a deity, supernatural, supranatural, magic, whatever terminology you want to use there is fine. Forrest and I are generally pretty willing to grant words as long as we just all understand how we're using them, right? And I guess what would be most interesting for me, and I think all of our viewers, would be if we could make a connection with those. Just basically what Forrest said a moment ago, like, where are we going with this? So like, let's just say, yes, spiritual experiences, they're a thing. But what it seems to be the case is that it's a lot of cool, flashy, mumbo jumbo, chemically stuff going on in the brain. Why does that lead you to believe in a God, or does it? Is it connected at all for you? Like, are these just totally separate things? Like, where are we going with this thought? That is what I would love to make some progress on, if we can.
Cool. I'm trying to get there, and
okay.
So here's the conclusion I've come to. I think when people say supernatural in relative to these experiences, if you actually look into, let's say, Johns Hopkins research on mystical experience, they have 6 criteria that they go by to define the experience. And, one of them is, of course, this connection with all people and things. Well, the people feel that they're connected to all, like the mystic says, we're all one. And then you have, a deeply felt positive mood. People feel not only that they're all one, but that everything is, there's a love for all people and things. And then another one is a transcendence of time and space. This is unanimously described amongst volunteers who meet criteria for this phenomenon. And, when people say this, that it deals with the complete dissolution of one's ego. And so your ego is no longer there inside that experience. And so what instead happens, there is this impression that all time, past and future, collapse into the moment. And I think
I'm familiar with the criteria. I'm asking what does it mean?
Right.
What's the point?
Right.
Yeah,
Get us. Take the next. No. Hang on.
Don't describe the whole literature. Yeah. Don't give us a lecture on it. Just tell us what you mean.
We got you muted for just a second, okay? Because truly, Forrest and I love having these conversations. We really want to hash out stuff and understand where other people are coming from, because we like to make sure that our positions are as solid and as based in reality as possible. And so if you've got some connection between these spiritual experiences and your belief in a deity or an afterlife or supernatural whatever, that is what we would like to get to. So we don't need to go through the criteria again for what John Hopkins says is a spiritual experience. We don't need to hear about what people experience. We don't need to hear about how many people have experienced or how cool it is. Honestly, let's get to the actual meat here and tell us why there is anything interesting at all about spiritual experiences, and how in the world does that relate for you to believing in a deity or something. Let's get to this, okay? So I'm gonna bring you back. You're unmuted now, but let's get to the point of this, because I think both Forrest and I, there is some interesting stuff here, but right now it just doesn't feel like we're really getting into it. We're just kind of like skirting the edges. So
we also have over 10 other people waiting.
Right. We also have a bunch of other calls. So.
All right, I'll try to get faster to the point. And I'm trying to get there. You guys keep on interrupting me, but okay.
You had 15 minutes.
When I said the sense of transcendence, I think that's what people confuse with supernatural. I think these volunteers do have a sense of transcendence, and I think I don't think it's necessarily supernatural. I think we all have a potential to have this phenomenon occur. And it doesn't necessarily mean something supernatural. It's not magical. It's not, something that defies the laws of physics.
Does that transcendence lead you to believe in a God? Like, fine, we'll just accept where you're at.
Well, I've had this experience for myself. That's why I'm so passionate about it, and I look into it. And I was an atheist before I had this experience, and it didn't lead me to believe in some kind of anthropomorphic entity. My notion of God and my understanding, interpretation of God completely was altered by this experience. And,
But the experience led you to believe in that. Is that what you're saying? Just to be clear, because that's what it sounds like you're saying, but you didn't say those words exactly.
No.
Cool. So then here's my response to that. Awesome. I'm glad we're on the same page. You had a spiritual experience. It fits these criteria. We have some good scientific data. Hell, John fucking Hopkins is even involved in it, which probably means there's some robust scientific explanation. Here's my question, because I feel like we're at the crux now. Okay, Jimmy? And so my question is, what if I had that exact same experience? I hit all the criteria and I come to a conclusion that is outright, explicitly contradictory to your conclusion. What do we do? Where do we go? I take a heroic dose. I have a transcendent experience. I don't believe the thing you do. What do we do?
Well, okay. I really see the neuroscientists, when they engage these volunteers, the volunteer could say whatever. You know, they could say, there's been volunteers that have said, you know, I'm still an atheist after this. And, but at the same time, it felt like my soul was bathed in God's love. You know, they'll say these kind of contradictory things. I think, you know, a lot of people who do say stuff like that, they haven't really looked into the, you know, the religious literature and stuff like that. The way
Jimmy, I've muted you again.
Fuck,
and I know. And look, like truly, I think there are very few instances of Forrest and I engaging in conversations where we are just outright assholes. Not saying it doesn't happen, right? But we're always trying to engage sincerely and honestly. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to get to the point. We want to clash a little. We want to be challenging, but respectful. And where we're at right now is, and please, Forrest, if I'm the only one feeling this way, please tell me, but it doesn't feel like we're actually getting to anything. I asked you a direct question, Jimmy, and we got no response whatsoever. Okay. So I go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, like, just if I can be more clear, Jimmy, we keep asking, why does this lead you to believe in God? And the best we've gotten from you is, well, I do.
Right.
And like, I have also had, you know, these phenomenal experiences. I have also had what would be classified as a spiritual experience. I have also, both sober and not sober, I have had similar experiences like this. And time and space collapsed, and I felt connected with the universe, and it was magical and wonderful and everything. And I'm still an atheist, and I was an atheist when it happened. And if somebody uses language like I felt bathed in love with my soul or whatever like that, maybe they're just using colloquial terms.
Right.
Maybe that's just how they talk, and it doesn't actually literally mean they both do and don't believe in God at the same time. You haven't given us anything. You just keep saying spiritual experiences happen, but we have a logical explanation for them. And we go, yes, you're correct. And then you say, and I believe in God. And we're like, why? And you're like, because spiritual experiences happen and we have a logical explanation for them. Right. We're like, right, that doesn't connect. So like, I don't know. I'm not the host today. So Elliot, I give it to you. If you want to give him another chance. Like
I'm giving you one more chance, Jimmy. Okay. And we are even going to put up our wonderful explain it to me like I'm 5-timer. Okay. I will bring you back here in just a minute. You will hear a beep when you are unmuted, and you will have a full minute uninterrupted to address exactly what Forrest just said. And if we don't get that, we will just move on, because I got some super chats. I got some other really cool calls we want to get to. So I'm going to unmute you here. We're going to put this up. And we're going to let you go. But when that timer stops, man, if we are not at the crux of this conversation, we are moving on. All right. So you're probably hearing a beep right now. You are back on, Jimmy. What is thy response? You have a full minute.
All right. Well, you know, Forrest said, I still don't believe in God. I could ask what he means by that term. You know, maybe he's interpreting it in a specific way when he talks about God, because the way the neuroscientists laid out is they relate it to, you know, what's referred to as perennialism. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but, you know, that these instances have been happening throughout millennia. That when people meet these criteria, it's virtually the same with what the Buddhist was referring to with nirvana, or with the Sufi mystics talk about with fana. You know, that this is the same exact phenomenon in consciousness. And this is actually what people would refer to when they refer to the divine or God. And so I think it's just a matter of semantics here that we're arguing at this point. I think that's what I'm getting at. And I really doubt that Forrest has had something what Johns Hopkins would call a complete mystical experience.
Okay, so your time is up. I would like to say that I don't really feel like you addressed anything that Forrest said.
I'd just like to point that out again.
Yep. I would also like to say I fully disagree. It is not a matter of semantics. There are individuals out there who 100% believe there is other existence happening around me now. Fully believe that. Maybe they use the word magic. Maybe they use the word spiritual. Maybe they use supernatural. Maybe they use gobbledygook. It doesn't matter, because the thing that they're actually trying to talk about does not have any demonstration. It doesn't. And so, yeah, I was hoping we would get some more right to it. We didn't
You
really
literally
seem
just
to.
said the same thing again.
We didn't really.
So there's
seem
these things that are called spiritual experiences,
Right.
and they're called, and they happen this way, and people all over the world have them and have had them for a very long time, and we have a naturalistic explanation for them.
I feel like that's
Thank
an
you
answer
so
for the
much.
non-believer, right? Like
I was
that's
gonna say,
points for our side.
Thank you for telling me that for 20 solid minutes. I agree. Next call. Let's go.
Yeah. We're gonna grab some calls because we have a good couple of calls coming in, and hopefully the crew won't yell at us too hard if we go a little over. I don't know how much time, but you stop me when you need to go for sure.
I'm good with going a little over,
Sweet.
especially with lines 20, 18,
Oh, yeah.
and 11 there.
Oh
Yep,
yeah, those are looking good, and I want to hit 14 too. I think that one's going to be good too. But first, let me read off some of these incredibly generous and awesome super chats. We've got Sloan sending in $10, said, I used to be a YEC like 4 months ago. Before I became an atheist, I decided to follow the scientific method and challenge my belief in God. Turns out I was wrong. Thank you, Forrest, for the great vids. And Sloan actually sent that twice to us and then sent us another $2 to say, whoops, I accidentally sent another, but keep it. So thank you. It will go towards good use because it helps keep this wonderful community going.
Congratulations on your deconstruction. That's huge.
Seriously, especially 4 months ago. That's awesome.
That's amazing.
We've got $20 from Roger Wenzel. Nothing to say that is half as interesting as what the hosts say. We do appreciate that. Nice. Me and My Human has given us $19.99, and it is this adorable little pair, like looking at themselves in the mirror, and like the eyes are popping out with hearts, and it says, "Thanks for being you."
I love the text description of the emoji.
I know, me too. I know, that's really my favorite part of this one. And Me and My Human actually gave us another one for $49.99, which is absolutely awesome. Thank you so freaking much. And it is a Shiba dog wearing samurai armor, riding "You're Amazing" in the air with sparklers. And we've got $4.99 from a longtime supporter of this show, Greg Markowski, saying, 2 of my favorite hosts. Thanks for the show. Well, thank you, Greg. We do greatly appreciate it. I have some other announcements, Forrest. I really do. But honestly, I want to grab line 20.
You know what? I want to go there that first, because I usually just forget to do the announcements. So like the fact that you're making a conscious decision, maybe it makes me look better.
So let's hit up Andrew. Him in Florida. He is a theist and wants to talk about how evolution actually proves that religion and God is true. So, hey, Andrew, you're chatting it up with SR and Forrest. What you got?
Hello.
Hello, SR and Forrest. Yeah.
Hey. Hi there.
So, yeah, evolution, religion contributed to our survival. If we evolved to become religious and religion dominated, the belief in religion or spirits dominated vast cultures for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, then that's God's footprint in the natural world, helping us survive due to religion, because these religious beliefs helped us with terror management and survival and unification. And so these experiences and beliefs prove a transcendent reality that helped us survive. So if we evolved to be religious, I'm saying that's proof that a transcendent reality helped us survive and gave us a tool.
I think I see where you're coming from.
This world, a tool.
I think I see where you're coming from, Andrew. And again, this is Forrest's domain, so I am absolutely going to let him take the bulk of this. I want to say this right at the front, and Forrest, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but evolution doesn't. Traits that get passed on to offspring don't necessarily benefit the offspring, right? Like, just because a trait gets passed on doesn't mean that it was the best thing for our survival or anything. Like, it's really more a matter of just getting to the point of having kids quicker. Like that silly email that Forrest was reading where the guy was like, you just want people to have as many kids and pass on genes. It's like, so that's why we get cancer when we're older, is because we still pass that stuff on, but we've already procreated at that point. So it doesn't matter. Like, and again, please take it away from here, Forrest.
Yeah, it's what you're talking about there is just population genetics is what's more important than individual genetics. And like, yeah, that's a thing. But like, so Andrew, if I'm understanding what you're saying properly, so I just want to make sure I'm not going to spend 5 minutes explaining something and you're like, well, that's not at all what I was talking about. So if I'm understanding what you're saying properly, you're saying that for hundreds of thousands of years, potentially, we have had religious belief, and that has been of some sort of benefit to us evolutionarily, probably has an evolutionary implication as to why it's there in the first place, and that is proof of this supernatural realm that has now left an imprint on our evolutionary history and our genesis, for lack of a better word, as a species. Is that what I'm getting from what you're saying?
Yep. Perfect.
Cool. I 100% agree with your premise. I don't at all agree with your where you came from or where you landed after that. So here's where you're thinking. You've got you are right to say that there is, sort of an evolutionary impetus to become somewhat religious. Superstition and coming up with weird explanations for the natural world, those do make sense evolutionarily, and there's a few reasons for that. The most common that we talk about is a false positive fear response. If you hear a rustling in the bushes and you assume that it's the wind and it's actually a tiger, you are now lunch, and you're not going to, it's bad for evolution. If, however, you assume that the rustling is a tiger and run away, but it was actually the wind, it doesn't matter. It's Pascal's wager works in evolution, right? If you assume that there's a tiger there and there isn't, then you're still surviving and you're still having offspring. If you assume there isn't a tiger and there is, you're dead. And so the ability, or I should say the habit of humans assuming there's something there, even when there isn't, is what leads now, evolutionarily, leads to what we have today of like apophenia, of the patternicity that we have, our ability, or I should say our tendency to find meaning in meaningless data. The reason why we see faces and shapes in clouds, the reasons why we can trace out shapes in the popcorn ceiling, the reason why we tend to have like a deep, meaningful experience when really just we saw a cool bird once, but then we take it as a sign and all this stuff. This pareidolia and apophenia, these ways that we find patterns, that is an evolutionary thing that has helped us survive, and it's a part of the function of our brains. But because that has happened, does not give any credibility to there actually being real magic and real gods out there. We didn't know what lightning was or where it came from. We didn't know what electrons were. We didn't know how air was superheated and clapped back together and made a sound. We didn't understand any of that. We saw bright lights in the sky that caused fires and were very loud and scary. And because everything else like that was caused by a human, we assume there must be somebody out there making that happen, and it's definitely not one of us. Therefore, it must be a god. That's how that happened. It doesn't mean there's actually Thor. It just means that we didn't know what this was, and we gave it an agency. The earliest gods, when we look back over the history of religion, and again, I'm not a theologist, so all the theologists out there can please correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I understand it, the earliest religions were centered around things like the sun, warmth, heat, light, protection, food. Then later on, you get things like hunting and fertility, procreation, sustaining the culture, sustaining our population, our tribe, right? Those were the earliest gods because those were things that mattered to us and things that we didn't have an explanation for the way that they worked. We knew that the deer came in this way and we weren't sure why. So we assumed there was somebody guiding them. We knew the sun came up and then went down. We didn't know why. So we assumed that it was somebody pulling it around, or it itself was something with an agency that was doing this on purpose. None of those beliefs are true. They were just our first attempt at explaining the natural world. And because they were our first attempt, they were also our worst attempt. That is the genesis of religion. It makes no sense to say, okay, therefore it must be real, any more than it would make sense for me to say, yes, Quetzalcoatl and Zeus are also real because these ancient people believed in them. That doesn't track. Does it make sense what I'm saying here?
Yeah. The individual does not prove the individual claims that a religion is real, or that the truth claims of those religions are real. I agree.
Or that religion at all is real.
Right.
It's just the first way that we explain the thing.
That's what I mean. Right. It's a way to explain the natural world. I got it wrong because various religious claims can be falsified in this life. No, I agree with that. So I guess my counterpoint would be it's not that the claim that doesn't prove the claims. It proves the validity of the religious experience, and it proves the existence of a transcendent reality, because we seem to still be drawn to a transcendent reality. We still seem to be drawn
But
to
how does that
something,
prove that it
even if
exists, though, Andrew?
Build
Just-
that bridge for me.
Yeah,
How does
just
that,
so
how?
like let's just Forrest and I will just take this statement, okay? Like we won't push back on this, okay? How about this? It seems people are drawn to the transcendent. Sure, totally cool. How
Absolutely.
does that get us to actually confirming the truth of it, though? The existence of that thing?
it confirms the existence of a thing, of something.
How?
It confirms the
How?
existence of
How does it
something.
do that? Because they're contradictory to each other. You use the same methodology to get contradictory results consistently. So how does that prove anything at all?
Yeah, it keeps demonstrating. We keep thinking that there's something there, even if we don't know what it is. We keep continuing to be drawn to it. We keep trying to name it. We keep trying to.
And why does that
keep
experience
creating
with
rituals,
humans lead you
so
to
we
believe
just
that the
don't
thing
have
is
the
in
means-
existence, though? Why do you actually believe that just because that is a condition that seemingly does exist right now worldwide throughout history, why does that lead you to say, therefore, it has to be in existence in some capacity? What is the step there? What is the connection?
Right. The connection that I attempted to make was that it brought about our survival, and we just don't have the tools yet to name it or to identify it. We're not advanced in science enough to determine it, but it's got to be a transcendent reality, because we continue to just believe in it, even without reason. Even
hang on,
Andrew,
our
hold on a
logic
second.
is built into us.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to keep cutting you off here, but like you just said two things that make no sense.
Right.
I want to try. So you were asked, why does us believing in something confirm to you that that thing actually exists? And your two answers were, because it helped in our survival. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter whether or not it helped in our survival. It matters whether or not it's true. There are lots of things that help in our survival that don't. It doesn't connect to anything in reality. And then the second thing you said is that we keep believing in it and keep trying to name it. Yes, humans keep being ignorant of the natural world because they have to grow up. We have to learn things. There's a reason why not everybody studies the same kind of science. I'm not a physicist. I don't know a bunch of shit about the universe out there. But if that's my lot in life. I'm a biologist instead. And there's lots of people who don't study any of this stuff, that don't have any background in it. So like, just because you believe something doesn't mean that it's real. Just because lots of people believe something doesn't mean that it's real. And when you're saying we don't have the tools to name it yet or to quantify it yet, we don't have the tools to detect it. We don't have any indication that anything like what you're talking about is real at all. And you're sitting here saying, yeah, but people believe it, so therefore it must be real. And I'm like, why do you believe in dragons? Lots of cultures had dragon beliefs. Why don't you believe in those? What about ghosts? Lots of cultures believed in ghosts. Lots of cultures believed in lots of things that you probably don't believe in. Leprechauns, brownies, lots of cultures have ideas about little tiny humans that do mischievous or helpful things around us. Do you believe in them? Why not? Like, just because a lot of people believe a thing doesn't mean that thing is true at all or has any reason for you to believe in it. You're talking about a very early, very wrong belief, and then pretending like the fact that it's a thing gives it validity. And I don't understand why you would do that.
Yeah.
I see. I guess my last ditch effort. We keep detecting something.
What?
Even though we have no proof of it, we keep detecting something. And I'm just saying that maybe there's got to be something there. Because what are we
detecting? That's the point of what Forrest was just saying.
Something.
What are we detecting?
Yeah.
And if at the end of the day, we have the exact same detection method that seems to pick up something, but it never seems to actually work with itself. There's all these contradictory experiences, and there are an incredible amount of other things in life that exactly fit this criteria, just like Forrest mentioned, that you absolutely reject. You don't think there's little elves running around fixing your sandwiches and keeping your refrigerator going, but
I hope not.
That fits the criteria about this transcendent stuff. So what is the differentiation there for you? Why do you say in this instance that it does positively confirm something?
I'm saying it's undetectable, and I'm sorry. I don't want to not answer you. The question was what again?
Why
do I keep,
when using this criteria that you have laid out for us about the transcendent, why do you not accept the other instances like Forrest just mentioned, right? Little elves or Roland the Closet Goblin. That's always a favorite around here. Like that, those instances fit this exact criteria that you're saying about the transcendent. Why, if that's the case, do you only accept one and not the others? They seem to be completely in line with each other.
Having the experience, yes, but they're falsified. The other ones are falsifiable. You can falsify elves.
How do you falsify? How do you falsify elves that they don't have any mass, they don't have any weight, they're spirits? How do you falsify that? What's the falsification criteria? It's the same thing as the transcendent.
I don't know too much about the mythology of elves, but I mean nobody believes in elves nowadays. It's been falsified.
But they do. But yes, they do. And it fits the
criteria. There are still people that believe in little things. Yes,
people
there absolutely
do.
are.
Yes.
I've met them.
Yes. And again, ghosts. That is definitely another one that just outright seemingly lines up perfectly with the bullet points that you've laid out for the transcendent. But you don't seem to accept that. I mean, I don't know. Do you? Like, do you believe ghosts are a thing?
No, I don't believe ghosts, like dead spirits of people. But I believe there's something.
But Andrew, you have to understand, lots of cultures all over the world for millennia have believed in spirits and ghosts.
And they've got experience.
And they said that they were experiencing it and detecting it. So why don't you believe in that?
They're putting words into something that we can't measure, we can't see, we can't find it. So why? So
why would you believe in it, right?
So why would you believe in it? That's a great question.
Yeah.
If it's undetectable by your own admission, if you're saying flat out, it's not, you can't detect it. It doesn't have mass. You can't, hold it in your hand and stuff. Why would you believe that it's real then?
Because the one evidence we do have is, even though it's undetectable, even though it's not falsifiable, we're programmed to believe in it, period, whatever name we put to it. And so because we're programmed, something has programmed us to do it.
No, I just totally disagree. I don't think we're programmed. I think that's a term that people use because in a colloquial sense, I think people want that to be the case a lot of times, but there is no demonstration that anything whatsoever has ever been put together by some transcendent being. There's no demonstration of that. And like I was saying earlier, when you said, well, we falsified little elves, we falsified ghosts. How? They are specifically in the same vein as things like the transcendent and the afterlife and deities and reincarnation. These are concepts that, kind of like what you just said, people are not really sure what the hell it is, but they're trying to fit some words together. But the issue with that is there's still nothing there at the center. And because that's the case, when you say to me, but we falsified elves, SR, I say, well, no, we haven't, because see, these elves are so light that they don't make an imprint in the carpet. And you go, well, that's fine. We just put a bunch of dust everywhere and then we could see their little feetsy prints. But no, see, you don't understand, because they have special shoes that powder doesn't apply to it. It doesn't adhere. That's what we're saying, is that this category that you have laid out for us of something that is real, is actually in existence, by your own admission, doesn't seem to hit the criteria that you require for everything else in life. And then when you come back to me and say, these other instances, that match up perfectly with this one that I'm laying out, those aren't real because they're falsified. But in reality, we can just play this game all day. I mean, we're not going to, but we could just play this game all day where you say, well, the transcendent is more of like it's not really like a place. It's like a thing, you know? And you're like, okay, well, I don't know what that means. So we can't go to the transcendent, but we can feel the transcendent. Like it just doesn't seem like there's anything there at the center of this concept. And that's just problematic. And especially when you're using the exact same methodology and you're just completely disagreeing with it in other scenarios, again, that seemingly match up perfectly. I don't see anything disanalogous about what Forrest was saying when it came to ghosts and elves and dragons. I just don't. We'll let you get one last thought in here, Andrew, and then we're gonna go because we got a couple of other really cool calls. But yeah, I mean, I guess just at the end of the day, like, if you could just give it to us one final time, Andrew, what is that real hardcore strong reason you think the transcendent is real? What is that for us?
I tried. I don't want to repeat myself. I don't want to argue.
That's fine.
Thanks for your guys' time.
That's fair.
So,
yeah, no, we appreciate it. We appreciate it, Andrew, and give us a call back in the future. I don't think that was a bad call. I just think we found ourselves in a place where, like, Andrew just wasn't, we weren't making progress. It didn't feel like we were getting a back and forth.
The last thing he said also was so frustrating, to say that we are programmed to believe these things. Like that's demonstrably false. And like that's even if we had some evolutionary thing in us that made us believe specifically that thing, and not just like what I talked about with apophenia, pareidolia, like the ways that we find patterns, things like that happen to manifest in these ways a lot of times, but don't always. If we really were all pre-programmed, for lack of a better word, to find this, then why is everybody's account different? Why are all these cultures having different answers?
Yes,
coming up with
exactly.
Completely different experiences, completely different idea, and like, oh yeah, we can't detect it. Okay, then how do you know it's a thing? Like and you touched on this, and that's really the biggest frustration I have. Is like, one of my favorite questions to ask in these situations is, would you use this exact same line of thinking for absolutely anything else? Would you say, here's a thing that we can't detect, we have no way of measuring, but I heard a lot of people believe in it, therefore it's true. And we hit several of those. We talked about dragons, talked about elves, talked about this, that, and the other. And he was very happy to be like, no, of course not. So the next question then, okay, how many people need to believe in dragons for you to believe in dragons?
Yeah.
Is there a number?
Right,
or is it just, this is either true or it isn't? And
Right.
if you can't detect it, then there's no reason to believe in it. And he himself said, I can't detect it, so there's no reason for me to believe in it. Right. Cool. Put that same thought into what you're doing now. Like, it's just, it's so frustrating when you hit this, Andrew, if you're listening to this, please go look up the bandwagon fallacy. And then also just apply the exact same line of thinking that you apply to dragons and pixies and ghosts and everything else to whatever the fuck it is you were talking about there. And see what comes out the other side. And if it doesn't make any sense, guess what? It's because it didn't make any sense to begin with.
That's I agree. That's probably a really good indication that it didn't make sense to begin with.
Gosh.
But we will pick you all up in the audience if you're feeling a little winded, because I have some good news for you. There is merch. There is merch on merch on merch on merch on top of merch. In fact, there's a limited edition t-shirt just for this month that says, hello, I'm an atheist. Why, you ask? Because believing in a God who sacrificed himself to save us from himself is a bit much to ask of any logical person. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So you can go get that and all kinds of other great stuff at tiny.cc/merchaca. Again, you know we like to make it easy for you. So go out there, grab you some nice merch, and run around your town repping the hell out of the AXP and the ACA. We do love that. It does make us feel good. And we have to do it. We have to do it because they are the ones that allow us to sit on here for way too long and ramble. We got to give a shout out to the amazing crew.
Look at them.
Oh my gosh!
Hey!
They're all upset with us right now because they're like, you guys are going way too long. Please shut up already. The cat has already decided to go back to sleep, which is good. Honestly, it makes sense. It makes sense. All right, so we have a few more calls, and I think some of these are going to be really, really cool. But I'm going to remind you folks real quick, if you are going to be in the Austin area, July 30th of this wonderful year 2023, why not come on freaking down to the live broadcast of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. Talk Heathen will be hosted by Jamie Boone and Jamie the Blind Limey. We've got the old Jamie, the new Jamie. It is just doubling up on Jamie. And then for the Atheist Experience, that will be hosted by Christy Powell and Objectively Dan. So you do not want to miss that. Yeah, that is going to be a great show. Doors open at noon, and yeah, get your butts there because
Christy Powell and Objectively Dan are legitimately two of the nicest dudes I've ever
met. Oh my god!
So go down
right?
there and just hang
seriously
out.
They're just very, very kind people. But don't tell them I said that because I'll deny that till the day I die. We are gonna. I think we should go out to Australia. What do you think?
I'm into it.
Let's hit up George. Him in Australia wants to tell us that Jesus was smart and correct. So yeah, you are on AXP with myself and Forrest. What you got for us, George?
Smart and correct. God.
That's what we got written here.
Yeah, smart and right is technically what's here, but
man.
yeah, that's what it says. Jesus was smart and right. Is that what you're here to talk to us about? Because we'll talk about it.
No, it's part of it.
Oh,
it's part of it.
okay.
I just okay. So I had my sister's turned. What religion she's turned? She's turned Jehovah's Witness. My daughter's a Christian. He thinks my mother's a witch.
Oh,
yikes!
And
sorry about that.
I'm sort of like trying to solve everything, turn my head in. So I've looked into the history of all this. I'm trying to research, like religion and go, well, what's going on, So reading the history of it, when I called the call screen, I said, well, listen, I think I know what's going on with Jesus because at the time, the political situation, Alexander the Great turns up, takes over the joint, leaves some generals in charge, piss everyone off, and it was just ripe for the time that, a person like Jesus would turn up and go, right, I've had enough of this, probably had enough of the Jewish way of life as well. And then, bang, you've got a rebellion. I mean, I pretty much feel, I could imagine myself like today, I'm pissed off with the way the world is today. And I mean, if I went out there shouting on Facebook and all the rest of it, mate, I don't know how long I'd last.
Well, the difference being that Jesus was an apocalyptic preacher who was saying the world is going to end very soon and you need to do XYZ thing to survive that. And he wasn't the only one around either. There's plenty of accounts of other apocalyptic preachers at the same time saying pretty much the same thing. That for Penn and Teller like talk about Apollonius. Apollonius was saying the same stuff, preaching the same ideas, and nobody around here is walking around going, "Oh, Apollonius Christ, I stubbed my toe," So like, yeah, he was an apocalyptic preacher saying crazy things at a time of political turmoil. That's not new or original, and that doesn't make him right or intelligent. I forgot who it was. I think it was Bertrand Russell who said that either Jesus was who he said he was or he was a lunatic. And like, clearly he wasn't who he said he was since all the shit he said didn't come true. So would have just been a lunatic then.
Yeah. What is thy response, George?
Mate, look, I really, I agree with you. There would have been a lot of people running around going, we're fed up and they're waiting for a king. I mean, it's in our nature to, especially back then, a king, we like to worship kings. We like to put people up on a pedestal. So someone comes along, they would have, well, let's make him king. And then that person would have gone, all right, well, maybe I am the king because you're brainwashed by religion. You don't have what we have today where we can start looking into things. And, we've got science for us to realize that, okay, it's not just a religious thing. There isn't lightning. We can explain lightning. So I understand what you're saying. That all makes sense.
So do you...
I'm just trying to make sense. I'm trying to make sense to my daughter and my sister to go, well, listen, this is very realistic. This would have happened. It just sort of got completely blown out of proportion.
I see.
So,
okay. let me make sure we're on the same page, George. It kind of sounds like what you're saying is that, like, the story of Jesus, there are lots of elements to it that seemingly are just very much commonplace everyday things. We know that people are real. We know that people lived back then. We know that people walk around and talk about stuff that they're hearing or thinking or seeing and all that good stuff. Are you saying you're trying to explain to religious family members about that, even with those elements being true, the supernaturally gaudy stuff, water to wine, walking on the ocean and crap, you're trying to point out that that stuff isn't real, even if this other mundane stuff is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean,
Okay.
I mean, there's other things there's other things in the Bible I've read. I mean, I've went and got a Bible, and I went, right, I'm going to read it. This thing is littered with bits of yellow paper with, like, what is that? What is that? I mean, I said, look, the first miracle. Why would you go to your mother's wedding and get everyone pissed? Your mother would crucify you. I mean, imagine how upset your mother would be. You know what I mean? It's not the sort of thing you do at your mother's wedding. So I'm using common sense.
I definitely say
to understand what's going on.
Yeah, and I definitely say there's, time and place for these types of conversations. And there really are a lot of great resources. I mean, obviously, there's 26 years of this show and many, many others. You can go listen to all the great, discussion that Forrest has on his channel, breaking down stuff. I mean, yeah, so go look into that for sure. And yeah, I mean, I think maybe the funeral or the wedding may not be the perfect time to just stand up and start saying that you don't believe in God and, like, yelling at people and stuff. But I would just say this, George, and this is just something that I always try to do for myself personally. I love engaging in these discussions, and I really do wish that we lived in a world where more people followed a sound epistemology, gave a crap about what was true, applied that consistently. But when I have these conversations with people, I feel like oftentimes more progress is made when I don't have the goal of changing them in this moment. When I come to the conversation with more of a goal of, hey, this is interesting. I'd like to hear what you have to say, and I'd like it to make sense to me. I want to understand where you're coming from when you say this thing is what I believe, right? And I find in doing that, in having a dialogue in that manner, you often get a bit more progress, just because it's more genuine, right? Like it really is. Because if we're just having a conversation just to try to, get somebody to answer the way that we want, that's not really a great, a great way to have that, I think.
Can I ask, just going off of that, I mean, it's sort of related. I mean, I had, like, I hear these, like, people who had experiences. I mean, I had, like, a massive experience, right? I'd call it a religious experience, because I ended up going, help me, Jesus, right? I mean, I was never religious, never had any, not even interested. I mean, I'm just a builder, play squash, go and have a good time. I'm not, right? And then I've had this experience in this hotel room, set me on this sort of path, and I was completely convinced. I've phoned back and said, I believe in God now. I've gone from that to now educating myself and going, well, hang on, I actually realise why that happened to me. I mean, I went and told my daughter about this experience. Because she's Christian, she's gone, oh, yes, Dad, and she's got all excited. But now that I realise what happened in that room, right, it was just, to me, can I discuss that with, because your mate there's a biologist, I think. Yeah.
So we are kind of near the end of our show, so we probably don't have time for a really long explanation about, like, the experience and stuff. But I will just say, George, it sounds like you're on a pretty good path. Like, it seems like you're questioning stuff and you're interested in learning more, and you're engaging with other people in this space. Just because we're so close to time, and we got a couple of other really cool calls we want to grab here.
That's all good, mate.
Yeah, but
Can I-
hey,
can I
hit up the.
just,
Go ahead. Oh, well, we dropped. He might have just said bye there. That's okay. But George, if you watch in the future, if you're watching back this, don't forget we got the Fan Run Facebook pages for all the shows. We got the Fan Run Discord. They're great places to go and have these discussions. And then, of course, a place like Recovering from Religion is always a wonderful resource when it comes to having these types of difficult conversations, especially with loved ones.
Don't we have a group where you can like kind of try out theist and atheist arguments and stuff like that? Like that might be a good place, because whichever argument or whichever position George is coming from, it'd probably be good to get some feedback on it.
Absolutely.
And I tell you, man, that call went totally different than I thought.
I know, me too.
I was so prepared because I was ready to like talk about like, okay, so Jesus said this.
I know. I was going to say all the things that Jesus got wrong.
Yeah.
Well, we do have, like I said, some other really, really cool calls. I think we're going to get to all of them. But first, have you ever said to yourself, gosh, I really love this ACA content. I really, really love it. And I wish that there was a place that I could watch it 24/7. Well, guess what? There freaking is. We have count them, 24/7 live streams. AXP TV delivers a constant stream of shows, clips, and specials from the over 26 seasons of the Atheist Experience. And now AEN TV provides you with clips from all of the other shows on the Atheist Experience network, like Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted, and Secular Sexuality, just to name a few. So yeah, pretty simple. Go out there, check it out, watch, listen to all your favorite hosts, and discover some great hosts that you have never even heard of. So check it out, tiny.cc/AXPTV and tiny.cc/AENTV. All right, we are going to talk with Christian, he, him. It sounds like you've got some moral objections to hell, Christian. So, hey, you're chatting it up with Forrest and SR. Hey. What you got for us?
Yeah. So first of all, it's nice to talk to you again. Sorry, we had a very, I think, quaint conversation.
Yeah, I thought so too.
So yeah, I mean, I was on another channel, The Line, like an hour ago. I talked to Matt Dillahunty, which was, I was happy to talk, but it was just name calling and insults and stuff. But
okay, well, let's not focus on other
more of an aggressive place.
Yeah, and let's not focus on other shows or anything. Yeah, like there's a bunch of content. Forrest and I are here. We're ready to go for it. But I might say a dirty word.
I don't mean to trauma dump.
I might. No, you're good, man. What you got for us?
Yeah, but basically what I wanted to ask them was about like moral objections to hell, because a lot of atheists who I talk to, it's kind of sporadic. It's not really like every atheist I talk to, but they usually have some type of objection to the idea of hell existing, being
I do.
Immoral or mean.
I have several of those.
Yeah, right. I can think of a few.
Okay, yeah. So I'm a Christian. SR, we talked before. I'm a Christian. Mm-hmm. I don't have objections to the idea of hell. I think it makes sense, and we can reconcile that. But I would love to hear what objections you have.
Forrest, would you like to?
I would love to start. Yeah. It's important to remember that like a lot of the times when you talk to Christians, and like you said, lots of different atheists are going to have different ideas about this. Lots of different Christians are going to have different ideas about this. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. But a lot of the times when I talk about Christians, talk about this with Christians, one of the first things they bring up is that like, well, there needs to be some sort of punishment. There has to be some sort of, a way for this to be structured. And where do you want these bad people to go and all these things? They're missing like three really important things when they talk about this. And so I think the really most important things for people when we talk about hell, the first most important thing that you have to remember is that this God, she made this system. She made it the way that it is right now. They made it this way on purpose. They have infinite power to do anything that they want. And this is the thing that they chose to do. So they could have done literally anything else, right? This was the option that they picked. The second thing that you have to remember is that this faith is very clear that it's not actually about what you do in your life or what kind of person you are. It matters what you believe in. If you repent and confess that Jesus is Lord and all these things, you get to go to heaven. It doesn't matter if you spent literally every moment of your life raping children. At the very last minute, you're like, damn, I shouldn't have done that. Sorry, I love Jesus. And now you get eternity in paradise. Meanwhile, the best person you could possibly imagine, who spends every day raising money for charity and helping people out and making the world a better place, that person's an atheist. They go to the same hell as every murderer and whatever else you want to go to hell. That's fucking stupid. And then the third and most important thing is that this is not love. Any system that involves a world as broken as this one, and the penalty for not being excited about it is a torturous pit. Any system that involves a torturous pit is not a loving, good, moral, or even remotely justifiable system. There's a viral clip of me on this show where I just say, like, if I tell my wife, if you don't love me, I'm going to tie you up in the garage and set you on fire. That's not love. That's fucking scary. And if God says, I'm going to send you to hell if you don't do XYZ thing, it doesn't matter what those things are. Any system that has eternal punishment as a punishment for a finite problem in your life, especially if that problem in your life is just incredulity, not believing what you're saying, that's fucking stupid. It's immoral, it's evil, it's reprehensible. And I guarantee every single person listening to this show is more moral than that God, or at least I sincerely hope you are. So yeah, that's a summary. Yeah, I'm not going to give you a whole soliloquy here. I've talked for like 2 whole minutes here. So that's a breakdown of what I think about it.
And I won't add anything yet, Christian. I want you to engage with that. And then I have a different objection too. I mean, I agree with all of that. Every single thing that he just said. I also have other objections too. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I could have gone
that?
on. I could have gone on, but let's start there.
We'd be here till 10 o'clock.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I'm sure we could talk about that all day. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I wrote them down in my journal really quick. And so 1, God made the system. 2, it's not what you do, it's what you believe. And 3, it's not loving.
Yeah, that's the long and short of it. Sure. Yep, that's great.
Okay. So yeah. So number 1, in that God made a system, that is true. However, it is not what was originally intended. Right. The Bible
so then God made a mistake.
How is it not originally intended?
Well, if I could, I mean, I might, if it's okay, can I not be interrupted really quickly? Because I'm flowing right now, you know.
Okay, cool.
So
I get you, man. And we're not trying to be disrespectful or anything, but you know, we are at the end. We're in overtime here, so we're trying to get as much out of this conversation as we possibly can. So,
so it was not what was intended. So God made a mistake. Then is what you're saying.
No, it's that by allowing free will, he gave people, in the first case, it would be Lucifer, who was an angel, right? Gave Lucifer the opportunity to sin against God. Hell was made for the devil as angels, as the Bible says. It wasn't willing, there's another thing the Bible says, it was not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. God didn't want people, he doesn't want anyone to go to hell, but because people abuse their free will, that is how, because God is infinitely holy, he has to punish evil. And I know you mentioned that already, but because he's infinitely holy, he has to punish evil, or else he wouldn't be a just judge. Second,
stopping there just for a second, because that's the first thing you said. I want to address it. So the first thing you said there, I'm going to start with that. Really quick question for you. Do you believe that God is all knowing, that God knows everything that will happen forever?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so then that's the end of the conversation.
Right.
God already knew that Satan was going to rebel. God already knew that evil people are going to do evil things. If I die right now and go to hell, God already knew it was going to happen. So free will doesn't matter. I have the will to do whatever I want. Awesome. But God already knows how I'm going to use the free will and how he's going to punish me for the free will, which means God specifically made me for the purpose of sending me to hell later. He made me to be tortured. That's evil.
Okay, if I could respond to that, God, there's foreknowledge, and then there's predestination. It's like if I watch a football game and I have it on my DVR, just because it's recorded and I can watch back and forth and do the replay, it doesn't mean that the football players didn't have a free choice to play.
Right.
Right.
But
I don't think
in the term of God, foreknowledge and predestination are the same thing. You're right. Foreknowledge and predetermination are different things, unless you're talking about a God. Because
Right.
if you have a DVR'd football game and it's the Eagles versus I don't know football teams, the Eagles versus the Giants, and
other
you
two.
already know that the Eagles are going to win because it's on DVR and you've seen it and you already know what's going to happen, and then you decide, all right, man, anybody who loses this football team, I'm going to kill them.
Yeah.
You already know the Giants are going to die. You
Yeah.
have made that determination, and you can say they have free will to play the game however they want, but whoever loses is going to die. If you already know the outcome, you are making an evil decision still.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So to respond to that quickly before I get to the second point, it's
Sure.
yes, God knows, but he honors our free will and allows us to make these choices, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I see what you're saying,
I wanna move
Christian,
to the
but
second one.
it feels to me, and we can move on to the next point if you want to. It feels to me that answer does not address the actual issue that Forrest is raising. That's what it seems to me, because if you're saying that the intention of God, unless you're saying that God can just fail in his intentions, which sounds like he made a mistake, but if you're saying that God truly intended for a certain outcome and only that outcome, but then gave us this thing that could somehow go completely against that outcome and honors that thing, that free will in us that goes against his outcome, and he knew all of this, it really does sound like the intention was, in fact, for people to go to hell and be punished. That really does seem to line up. And maybe my logic's flawed somewhere, but I really feel like that makes sense.
All right. You can feel that way. That's fair. I feel like with that last part, it's actually no. I don't have to say that. That's fine.
Sure.
I do want to honor your
Let's
time.
move on to
your second thing.
Let's move on to the next one. Yeah. No worries. I mean,
Yeah. I just want to honor your time. The part about not what you do, but it's what you believe. That is true. That's not necessarily, in my opinion, a problem.
Okay,
Because
so
we're all
you're
just-
okay with the fact that
just
somebody
whether we
who
accept
is
it
a pedophile and an active pedophile, someone rapes a bunch of kids, but they're a Christian, they get to go to hell. Meanwhile, I, as an atheist, I try to make the world a better place. I
think
donate
you
to
mean
charity, never rape any kids. I now go to hell, right? That's okay with you? The Christian pedophile goes to heaven. The moral atheist goes to hell.
Yeah, it's not. Well, it's not that I particularly enjoy it, because I don't. And it's not to say that because you believe, and it's something a lot of people get confused too. It's like, just because you believe the gospel, it doesn't mean God doesn't punish you, right? You know, it doesn't mean sin is any less deadly.
But that doesn't seem to get us
escape the point
of what the problem is. Again,
I'm about to answer.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. How I think about it, because I hear this a lot. It's kind of like a commonality objection, but it's like if I was a career criminal, like a rapist, God forbid, or something like that, and then I accepted the gospel, what would it mean if God said, "No, you're too bad. I don't want to forgive you"? That would mean that he's not loving, which would violate.
It would mean that he was just
love, which would make him. Well, maybe to you, maybe in our kind of normative level of ethics, right? But if he compromised his mercy by forsaking a promise, that would make him not loving because he didn't honor a promise. You know.
And my point is that God has already compromised his mercy by having hell at all.
Yeah.
If you ever torture anyone for any reason ever, you are not merciful, pretty much by definition. And especially if the criteria for not getting tortured is worship, then you're not just not merciful, you're an egomaniac. You're a lunatic. You're a monster.
And just real quick, I don't want to tack too much on all at once for you, Christian, but it like
no problem.
The idea of breaking a promise, it is not something that is so deeply incredible, transcendent, or anything like it. Kant spoke about this, like sticking to your promises no matter freaking what. But that doesn't take into account the fact that situations change. And if I promised somebody, for instance, if I promised somebody I would never, ever physically harm somebody. I promise you that, Mom. I love you, Mama. I promise you I'll never do that. And then somebody is actively trying to kill my mom. Like, it feels to me like we would want to break that promise. Like,
yeah, well, with that part, that for us, how I say it is like for us limited beings who are very ingrained with and kind of accustomed to sin, it's not a big deal for us, right? We're kind of on a spectrum between, you know, total depravity and holiness. We're kind of like in the middle somewhere. It depends on the person, right? But with God, because he's infinitely holy, even this one teeny tiny sin is infinitely a transgression against his infinite holiness, right? So that's why he, you know, even though it's maybe tempting for us, because God is infinitely holy and infinitely just, he can't, you know, just by virtue of not contradicting himself, he can't break his own promise.
So
Now,
let me ask you a question then, Christian.
It not being, okay, go ahead.
So do you have anyone in your life that you love very much?
I have many. I hope you do.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I do, very much so. I'm very happy about that. So pick your favorite, whichever one you love the most, if that's, you know, theoretically speaking. I'm not actually asking you to pick, but just like, you know, pick one. Exactly what would that person have to do for you to be excited about the idea or okay with the idea of torturing them for all eternity?
What would they have to do?
Yeah. What would that person have to do for you to be
honest.
like, you know what? The best possible thing to happen right now is that I just rip your skin off, set you on fire, you know, drill your eyeballs out. That would be the best thing to do at this moment. What would it take for that person to do for you to be like, you know what? Torture is justified and actually a good thing.
Honestly, I'm not sure. I guess, well, I'm a Christian, so it's kind of biased, but I would say like just curse God and blaspheme him and spit in his face. That's pretty bad, right?
So you're saying that if
honest.
whether you have children, I don't know, but like you're telling this person that you love, your child, your spouse, your parent, whoever it is, would you be willing to tell that person, hey, you know, if they say I don't like God in front of you, you would say, all right, get in the garage. I'm going to get the power tools. It's time to torture you. Is that really honestly what you're going to say here?
Well, I think no. Maybe it's a misunderstanding, but I guess I'm looking at it maybe too literally in a Christian lens. But to answer your question, I don't know what it would take. I just don't know.
I can answer the question very easily. It's nothing.
Nothing.
There is not a single thing that my wife could do for me to say, you know what would be the best thing would be for you to be tortured. I would never, ever want that for her or any other person for that matter. Because that's fucking insane. And now here's what I want you to try to wrap your brain around here. Two things. Number one,
I'll try.
You are so, you know, morally compromised because of this belief that you're holding on to that you just tried to justify torturing your loved ones. Think about that and let that keep you up at night. I hope it does. And the second thing that should bother you.
So that's, I mean, I think that's pretty honest.
The fact that it's even a question is a kind of a problem. And I hope you can recognize that. And then the second thing that's really big here is that when you ask God this question, when you ask God, what's the thing that you could do that someone you love could do to make you want to torture them? God's answer is not suck my dick. If these people don't worship me, if these people don't suck up to me, if these people don't tell me every day that I'm the best thing in the world, if these people even for a minute besmirch my character and my glory, they should be tortured. What an asshole. That makes him an egomaniac. That makes him a monster. That makes him a complete freaking sociopath. That makes him evil. So you're having a problem coming up with a reason why you'd want to torture somebody that you love. Good. The answer should be, I would never do that. But whatever. God's answer is very easy. Don't make me feel like the biggest guy on the planet, and then I'm going to torture you. What a dick. That's awful.
Yeah, and this kind of relates to the third question, which I have something written for.
Get into it.
Like when people think about, let me pause it like this. When people think about hell, they usually think about like the devil with like red paint, like poking somebody. You know, it's just super hot or whatever. And it's like, that's not necessarily true. It's described as outer darkness, as gnashing of teeth, and, you know, basically darkness, mental anguish, torment. It's painful. Yeah. It's God stripping his hand of part of creation, saying, okay, if you don't want anything to do with me, I'll honor your request and I'll exile you to just, basically.
Doesn't
The
super
reason why
duper
that-
change anything, but go on.
Yeah, that doesn't seem loving.
I'm about to answer your third.
Yeah, please.
Point.
Perfect. Yeah, by all means.
Thank you. The reason why I think it's kind of erroneous to say that it's not loving is because, as I mentioned earlier, as I mentioned on the other goofball show, God has to punish evil because he's infinitely holy. If he compromises his holiness, even just one tiny bit by just letting something off the hook, then he would not be holy. And that would, make him evil.
But I don't think that's loving.
To not punish.
Sorry, what you just said there circles us back to the first premise that I brought up. You're right. Cool. God has to punish evil. I'll accept that. I don't believe it, but let's say for sake of argument, sure, God has to punish evil.
Fair enough.
Is there more than one way to punish somebody? I think there is. I teach, if one of my students throws a pencil across the room, I'm going to treat them very differently than the student that punches somebody in the face. Right? If a student punches somebody, I'm going to give them a more severe punishment than the one who threw a pencil. But that's not how it works for God.
Actually,
for God, throwing the pencil and punching somebody both equate to torture in a lake of fire. That's fucking dumb, dude. So, like,
point. I have something to say about that. That's actually a good point.
Can't God come up with any better way to punish evil than eternal torment in conscious anguish in a lake of fire? Can't God come up with anything better than that? Again, they made this system. They had every option at their disposal, and this is the one that they picked.
All right. Well, I addressed the first part, but I want to stay on track. You brought up a very interesting point about what couldn't God do something better or less severe? And I think that, and you got to hear me out. I think that the way that hell exists, according to the Bible, not like pop culture, but what hell actually is, I think it's as necessary as it needs to be to get the job done. Now, if I could finish, when God sends somebody to hell, on the basis of not accepting the gospel, essentially what it's saying or what it means is your whole life, your whole mortal life, God is sending you flowers, He's sending you chocolates, He's sending you the gospel and the Bible and stuff. But if you don't accept it, that's fine, that's your choice. And He'll honor that choice, because if He didn't honor it and He compromised it, then that would make Him not loving as well. But that's another topic. Once you die, then instead of God forcing you into heaven, because that would also compromise His love and make Him unholy, He says, okay, I'm not going to do anything to you. I'm in fact not even going to be around you. I'm going to exile you to a place where my presence does not exist. And
pain.
You can do whatever you want
Also
there.
pain.
I won't be a part of that.
I would be just fine with going somewhere where God doesn't exist.
Right. It's not just that God leaves.
Also the torture.
You.
Right. It's not just that God exiles you. It's not that we've hang on. It's not that we've taken Napoleon out of France and just put him on a nice island at a resort. We have taken Napoleon out of France and are repeatedly kicking him in the fucking nuts while stabbing his eyes. That's what we're doing. That's what it is. And that kind of leads me to my big objection with hell, which is I understand and agree that when we do bad things, right? Let's just real simple here. We don't need to go into all the semantics on the words, but when we do bad things, we need some type of consequences. But those consequences are specifically related to preventing that bad thing from either occurring again in that individual or others, and getting to a better place of benefit all over. You don't get that when you put somebody to death and beat the shit out of their dead body. That's what's happening in hell, is you're not getting any benefit whatsoever. All you're doing is threatening people their whole lives and saying that if you don't do the good thing now, the punishment afterward will be forever, and there's no way to ever get better. You're dead. You're in hell forever. The doors are locked from inside. And so the reason we put somebody in jail for a month is not because we're like, oh, no, you did a bad thing, and I guess you just need some time out. No, it's because we're hopefully trying to go about this place of maximizing the benefit to stopping the bad action that occurred in this person and maximizing the benefit of showing the society that we live in that we don't tolerate certain heinous actions. But if people just do bad things and we just put everybody to death and just again beat the shit out of their dead bodies, how does that ever give us any ability to find more benefit? How do we ever doing that? It just sounds like harm to me.
Yeah. So a few things about that. So when we're talking about hell being basically a banishing zone for evil, the reason why hell is so bad is because God doesn't exist there. Because in the Bible, at least, God's goodness emanates through creation. The Bible says it rains on the just and unjust. No matter in your moral life, no matter what you believe or don't, we get common grace, as it's called. We get, happiness. We have the ability to be happy, to be in a relationship, things like that. When people die and they don't want God or they don't want anything to do with God, because they don't want anything to do with God, God has to strip himself of that presence in that area because people don't want anything to do with that. And it's also to say that people in hell want to be redeemed. A good example of this is actually the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. When Lazarus is in hell, the rich man, or not Lazarus.
Yeah. Hang on, Christian. Just not to be rude, but just to speed it up a little bit. Like, yeah, Lazarus goes down to hell. He sees a guy. The guy's like, even if you tell people when you come back, you won't believe and stuff. And I just
that's not what I was getting at. What I was getting at. Hang on,
Christian. I appreciate it, but hang on a second, because I just feel like truly where you have been going for the last couple of minutes just is not addressing the real foundation of the problem. The real foundation of these problems with hell is not answered by because God leaves, that makes it a shit place. That's not the issue. Like, fine, if God's presence isn't somewhere in the universe, it's a shitty place. That's fine. I'll grant you that, even though I think that makes no sense. I'll give it to you. But the problem is you still don't answer the objections. It doesn't answer the whether or not it's loving thing. It doesn't answer the fact that you just have to stroke God's ego all the time and still be a piece of shit person. Like, it doesn't answer the fact that it provides no benefit in terms of fixing any of the past problems because you never have an option to do it.
It also still doesn't address the fact that God knew who he was sending to hell 100%. When he created them.
Absolutely.
He made people in order to torture them later and then act like it was your fault for being tortured. Like, none of what you said here addresses the actual moral issues. You're just trying to make justifications for the system without addressing the fact that the system sucks ass.
Right.
Okay. Well, firstly, I apologize for being long-winded.
You're fine.
I
am too.
We're an hour over at this point.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the part with Lazarus the rich man. The point of that part was Lazarus didn't want to leave hell. He when he saw, or I'm sorry, I keep getting confused. The rich man didn't want to leave hell. When he saw Lazarus, he was like, "Get Lazarus to help me out." Like, it made him a worse person because without God's grace. And we can get into that later. There's schools of thought about that. But the reason why it's loving that hell is a place for punishment, to finally answer your question, is because when you love somebody, you have to have some level of admonishment or correction.
Yes, but
but there's no correction.
With, like, isn't there some redemptive quality? And there are schools of thought about, like, can you be redeemed after you die, which I personally don't believe, but there are schools of thought about that. But, if God just let stuff off the hook, that wouldn't make him loving. So,
but we're not asking for God to let stuff off the hook. We're going back to the thing that Forrest said, which is he's teaching a class of adults, and these are all people in front of him. And one of the students decides, you know what? They're just going to make a little spitball and they're going to shoot it at the board. And oh boy, that's wrong. And you sure shouldn't do that. We're not standing here saying, Forrest, you can't admonish that person in any way, shape, or form. But what we're saying is that it feels like the student has shot a spitball at the board and the teacher turns the fuck around and breaks the kid's neck. That is not proportional.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. I agree that yes, love is something where when you truly feel that for another person, and there are missteps and there are corrections, you provide those. You stand there and you say, hey, look, I think you made a mistake here, and I think this is how we can do better and stuff. But again, that goes back to what I was saying about maximizing that benefit, minimizing that harm. But where it sounds like we're at is, again, like Forrest said earlier, apparently, if you're just if you just don't believe, but you're a super duper cool person, and then there's this other guy who also doesn't believe and just like spends his weekends murdering people the entire time he's alive, the punishment is the same for those radically different things. And it doesn't seem loving to me to just always go to the intense extreme. That would be proportional. The admonishment would be based on what the action is, but that's not how God does it. It's a one size fits all.
Actually, it
either
is, actually,
either you love me or you're fucked for eternity.
The same for everybody.
But how do you know that? There's no. All you're doing is just claiming this. You're just saying that that's
in the Bible. I didn't just make it up. It is in Scripture.
So really quick, then let me ask you, Christian. Let me just ask you quickly, because I'm not going to get into why you believe this because we don't have any time. Like that could be a whole other thing. But like, just
fair enough.
What Elliot just said, I think is really important, and what you said in response is really important. Elliot just repeated the point that the major issue, or one of the major issues with this hell concept, is proportionality. I don't believe in God. Otherwise, I think I'm a pretty decent dude. I do my best, right? But I don't believe in this God. I get the exact same punishment as the person who spends their days and night murdering, raping, committing genocide, torturing babies, eating puppies, whatever the fuck this person does, this horrible thing. And we get the exact same punishment. And you're saying that is not only acceptable, but like expected of a just system. And I don't think that you actually believe that. Too. I don't think you actually believe that. I think you're saying that as a way to just kind of try to make this make sense for you. And the reason why I would say that, because I know it's shitty to tell people what they believe, but like the evidence that I have for that is like, do you honestly think, I'll give you a chance to say, do you honestly think that me sitting here placidly not believing in your God is as bad and deserves the same punishment as murder?
Okay. It's going to take a brief second. So I do have to.
That was a yes or no question.
Yeah, give us the explanation, but yes or no.
That's a loaded question. I can't answer that with yes or no. That's a loaded. I'm sorry.
I don't. I can.
Do you think that me believing in? Do you think that me being an atheist is as reprehensible and deserves the same punishment as me being a murderer?
No, and I can tell you why.
Yeah, give us some explanation.
Then I shouldn't be sent to the same hell for it.
Well, I'll tell you why. The reason why my position isn't compromised, and I can also say no, is because, as I said earlier, just a few minutes ago, people experience hell in different ways once they get there, and the hell is not the same for everybody, actually. You know, it lasts forever, yes, but hell can be way worse for some people than others, and there's scripture to support this. But, you know, and I don't know if I answered the part about not loving. I think I did, but I don't know if you were satisfied with it. But, and it's not so much that, and interrupt me if I'm off track, but it's not that God is tormenting you or anything like that. At the end of the day, what it boils down to is God gives you a chance to trust in him to save you from yourself, basically, save you from your own sins, which God didn't want. He didn't make you do anything. You know, you sinned on your own free will. And by not accepting God, and, you know, in the Christian worldview, by not accepting God, you're putting yourself in hell, which I'm sure you've heard before.
Except that God already knows you're going to do that and has already decided to punish you before you were born. And also, it's not really a choice if you don't provide any evidence. If God wants me to believe in him, he could fucking show up. God could just pop in and be like, yo, I'm God, I'm here. And I'd be like, oh, neat. And then I wouldn't be an atheist anymore. I'd still be an anti-theist. I'd still be saying many of the same things, but then I would believe. And so this, again, go back to the classroom. If I'm in front of a bunch of kids and I'm like, yo, black holes exist, and they've never heard this before, and I'm like, and they're like, okay, why? How do you know that? And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to tell you, but if you don't believe me, I'm going to kick the shit out of you. Like, is that honestly giving them a choice, or is that just threatening them? If this God is all loving and all wise and all knowing and all these things, can't he come up with anything better than just believe me or I'll hurt you? Like, that's a really stupid, barbaric way to behave. That's not an intelligent, interesting, loving way to behave.
All right. Well, to answer that question, there is more. First of all, if not to speak for God, but how God could see that is that's very prideful to say. No offense, but it's like what God would probably say is like, no, humble yourself, and I will reveal myself to you.
God should humble himself and not torture people for not loving him. That's a very prideful thing to do.
Back to
I just think it's a cop-out to say that you need to humble yourself and then God will present himself. To say things like, all you have to do is sincerely seek for God and then you'll find him. There's just so much evidence out there that is not the case. And it doesn't apply to every other thing we do in our lives. Like, I don't have to humble myself in front of BMW for fucking cars to exist, right? Like, they're here. I don't have to sincerely seek out a fucking platypus to know that it's an animal that's real. And I feel like that method is just one that always makes me feel like is demonstrating that the level of thought given to why you have accepted the conclusions, it just isn't there. And I hate that. Because I want everyone to be robust in their understanding. I want everyone to, I'm not saying everyone should have the same fucking conclusion as me. Again, I think properly applying certain methodologies like skepticism leads you to these conclusions that I have expressed. But I'm not out here trying to get everybody to think the same damn thing, but I'd sure love it if people had a really solid and robust understanding. And it just feels to me like when the response is given that, oh, if you just sincerely go looking, you'll find it. Because that just doesn't apply anywhere else. It's never been the case.
Especially when torture is on the line. Like,
especially
that's the thing. Like,
eternal torture.
It's one thing to say you have to think about it this way in order to get it. That really blows. But especially when the punishment for not believing it is torment. I'm sorry, it's not good enough. It's an evil and corrupt system, and like making excuses for it doesn't make it any better.
Yeah. Give us your last thoughts, and we'll get the heck out of here and let everybody go home. Yeah, you only got a few minutes, but yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I won't take too long, I promise. Thank you.
Please.
To finish answering your question, Forrest, I think your name is. I don't have YouTube up. And to answer your question of like, why doesn't God just show himself all the time or whatever? One, or it's actually kind of a two-parter thing. One, that would sort of compromise our free will by not really giving us a choice to have faith. But the second part to that is going back to the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. In that parable, Abraham said to the rich man, even if they don't believe what I've already given them, they're not even going to believe if someone rises from the dead. So it's like, and even if God showed himself to somebody right now, it doesn't automatically mean that they're going to believe. They may. But sometimes,
I just feel like that's in the same vein as sincerely seeking and humbling yourself so that God appears. Also, honestly, I do, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Christian.
It is an issue of the heart, yes.
I just feel like that's the exact same argument cop out, and really what it is at the end of the day is it's not an explanation. Like, nothing is clarified in that understanding, and it doesn't apply literally everywhere. Like, whenever I hear religious people ask me, what criteria do you require to accept the existence of a deity? The same fucking shit I do for everything else, because that's the best way. That's the best methodology. You know what? Go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say, the thing is that, like,
the pantry fallacy, by the way, but go ahead.
The thing is, God knows. If God is all knowing and all powerful, then God knows exactly what to do to convince me.
Absolutely.
And doesn't do it. Like, you're talking about this tale of Lazarus, and like, oh, well, they won't believe this. Yeah, but like, God can convince me, right? He can do it. He can show me the things. And you talk about compromising free will, but there's several times in the Bible where God does compromise free will just so he can show off more. The most common example being the Pharaoh in Exodus. The Pharaoh wants to let the slaves go, and God hardens his heart so that he won't do it, and then makes another plague happen. And then in the next verse it says, and the Pharaoh wanted to let them go, and God hardened his heart so that he would not let them go. And this happens over and over again. And like, also, if you think that free will would be violated by knowing that God exists, what about Satan? Satan knows for sure that God exists. Satan has met the dude and still chose to rebel against him. Satan knows everything there is to know about God and still made the decision to not worship him. I would be the same way. If God proved himself to me, I would be the first one to sit here and say, hey, I'm a theist. I'm a theist. I believe that God's real now, but he's still a dick, and I don't want anything to do with him. So, like,
that was my whole point. It's not just about evidence. Sometimes people just don't like him, you know?
But that's the thing, man. If God really cared about us believing in him, he could at least show the fuck up and try to show us that he's real. God is the shitty, abandoning, absentee father of the world. Like, I'm not interested in it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it's not a good enough explanation, and it certainly doesn't justify hell.
Yeah, and I think that's a fine place for us to wrap it up today, Christian. Again, I think this was a good call.
I think it was decent.
Yeah, I thought so. Again, we disagree on some stuff, and I think we both, all three of us here really laid out our thoughts, and the from here it's just leaving it up to the audience, I guess. But yeah, I do appreciate it again, Christian, and we're gonna go ahead and let you go. And thanks so much for hanging out with us and calling us. We really do. I gotta say, I want these conversations. I do. Mm-hmm. I love these conversations, and I want to talk with people who sincerely believe. A lot of times I don't feel like we always go as far as I would like with thoughts. But again, I thought that was a pretty good call and a great way to wrap up. We could have been
on that call for an hour and a half.
Gosh, I know. Eventually, we're going to have to let this crew go home and probably eat some dinner or something. Right. I am going to run through these last few awesome super chats from some great fans out there. Copper Zeski, $5 says, thanks, Forrest, for helping me deconstruct my beliefs in young Earth creationism.
Thanks so much for watching,
brother. We've got $20 from I met Raider. I butchered that. So I am an e-trader just because. And then we've got a $19.99 from me and my human again crew appreciation donation. Thank you so much. Those. The crew is truly wonderful. And finally, $5 from Sal Willis. You two make an awesome team, both great listeners and responders. BTW, love the pinky ring SR. Thank you. This one is a hand dug Brazilian emerald that a friend of mine dug up by himself and made the rest of this. So he cut the stone and he made the ring. And then this one was given to me in my grandmother's will. So yeah, that's a fun little fact for everybody. Yeah. But before we finally let you all go home, I'm going to remind you the prompt for this week is name a mistake God made during creation. Put that in the comment section below this video, and your comment may be read out on next week's episode. So check out right at the beginning, because you will always hear those top 3 answers. And Forrest, I gotta say, man, this was fun. I really had a great time doing this. I'm glad we got to hang out again.
This is a great show.
Yeah,
I think honestly, oddly enough, I think the best line of this show was like a throwaway thing that you said just in the middle of some explanation. You said that skepticism properly applied leads you to support of LGBT people.
100%.
Like, I know that's really off topic,
100%.
but I agree wholeheartedly.
Totally.
I think that's a huge thing. Because we always have people like, I thought this was the atheist show. Why are there pronouns in their bios? Like, because it makes logical sense.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. I will tell you right here, right now, folks, as we are ending this show, I will take that fucking burden. I will take that fucking burden. Call me next time I'm on. I'm happy to talk about it because this is a great place to do it. We've got a bunch of wonderful people. And if you want to reach out to us, there are a couple of ways you can do it. One way is just by hitting up our website, atheist-community.org. You can find out all the latest stuff that's going on, or you can shoot us an email at tv@atheist-community.org. So this has been so freaking great. I don't know. Let's go eat or something. Let's get the hell out of here, y'all.
That sounds really nice.
Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.